Chapter 1184. Bufong's sudden appearance interrupted everyone's thoughts. Bufong's words were like a sharp sword, cutting through the void. Everybody couldn't help but take in a breath of cold air. The clear sound of the slap reverberated through the entire place, shocking everyone. They didn't expect that in the immortal chef test room, someone would dare to slap the judge. Cece gritted her teeth and cried pitifully on the stage. She felt wronged, not only because the other contestant from the other floors had laughed at her, but also because the judge was angry at her and wanted to disqualify her from the test. Cece didn't do anything wrong. Why should she suffer like that? Thus, when she saw Bufong, she vented all the grievances in her heart. Cece was actually a strong girl. However, no matter how strong she was still a girl. You dare to hit me? The judge covered both sides of his face and stared blankly on the spot. He had never thought that as a judge, someone would dare to hit him. Who was it? That person was so bold. Do you want to die? The judge finally got himself together. Gazing at Bufong, who was swinging his hand, his eyes seemed like they were about to shoot flames. At this moment, he even had an impulse to kill Bufong. Someone dared to hit him. When he was on the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm, no one dared to disobey him because he was a descendant of an aristocratic family on the 5th floor. But now, after coming to the 1st floor, someone dared to slap him in front of him. You think you can scold my apprentice chef? Who do you think you are? Bufong looked at the judge in front of him, his face emotionless. Bufong was really unhappy. It wasn't only because of the contestants in the arena, but also because of the judge in front of him. He wanted to disqualify Cece from the test. Where did he get the right to do that? Looking at Cece, who was crying like a pear blossom in the rain, Bufong was even angrier. He was a very protective person. Feeling sorry for Cece, Bufong swung his palm again. With a loud smack, it landed on the judge's face. The Heaven Chief assessment is to cultivate the next generation of outstanding people, not a place to display your power. Bufong said coldly. Moreover, you actually bullied a little girl, bullied my apprentice chef. This is even more unforgivable. The surrounding people were all stunned, unable to react for a moment. Very quickly, many people realized what had happened and couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air. The way he looked at Bufong was very shocking. He felt that Bufong was seeking his own death. This judge was the original Heaven Chief of the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. Their statuses were very honorable. Not to mention these low-level aristocratic family Heaven Chief. Even the aristocratic family Heaven Chief, who was originally from the 5th level, wouldn't dare to throw the judge's face like this. Where did this young man get his confidence from? I'm going to kill you. The judge rubbed his nose as he spoke through gritted teeth. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. His nose was boiling, and a stream of heat gushed out. The bright red stream of heat made his eyes sharpen. Boom! A terrifying aura exploded from his body. A buzzing sound rang out. A blade light suddenly flashed, slashing toward Bufong's head. It wanted to cut Bufong into 2 halves, splattering his blood on the spot. The surrounding people also sighed regretfully. Many of them looked at that blade light, feeling a chill in their hearts. Although the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm no longer existed, the original aristocratic families of the 5th level were now scattered to the other 3 layers of the Heaven Chief Realm, regaining their right to speak. After all, the once glorious aristocratic families of the 5th level still had their power and influence. Offending them would not end well. The people present didn't recognize Bufong. Although they had all heard the name of the great demon, not many of them had seen Bufong with their own eyes. Although Bufong had made a name for himself in the Heaven Chief competition, only a small number of people knew about Bufong. Thus, in the eyes of the people present, this young man wearing a striped red and white chef robe was simply courting death. Although he had unexpectedly slapped the judge a few times, soon, this young man would be completely smashed into pieces under the rage of the judge. On the stage, many contestants laughed in a low voice. They could see that Bufong should be the one who stood up for Cece. However, it was precisely because of this that they wanted to laugh even more. A country bumpkin was enough to make them laugh. Now, Another retard had appeared. They laughed louder, and their mocking eyes were like steel needles stabbing toward Cece. Cece also stopped crying. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed. Looking at Bufong, she clenched her fists. Facing the judge's knife, Bufong was very calm. With his current cultivation base, he could easily crush this judge. Cece, continue cooking. With your mentor here, no one dares to bully you, Bufong said. His gaze fell on Cece, and he cast a few encouraging glances at her. Cece was bewildered. Then, she nodded, stepped on the chair, and began to cook. Just mind your own business. You're courting death. With a swishing sound, the knife light fell, and the judge's gloomy voice echoed. The wind from the knife came, making Bufong's hair flutter. All of a sudden, Bufong lifted his head, his cold eyes looking straight at the judge. He directly raised his palm. Buzz in his spirit see, his divine perception surged. A moment later, a terrifying mental force burst out from his body. Like a ripple, it spread out. In the blink of an eye, the faces of the onlookers changed dramatically. The pressure on their shoulders was so heavy that they couldn't breathe. What a terrifying aura. Everybody's eyes shrank, staring at the young man's face. Who was that young man? How could he have such a cultivation base? The judge felt that his knife was caught. Under the judge's frightened gaze, Bufong slowly reached out his hand, grabbing the latter's kitchen knife. Then, he clenched his fist, and the kitchen knife was actually crushed into pieces. The immortal energy within the knife was scattered. From an immortal tool, it was reduced to a scrap metal. How could this be? The judge sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes frightened. His knife was a high-grade immortal tool. Even a 5-star true immortal realm expert couldn't crush it with his physical strength. This guy, who was he? The judge knew clearly that he had kicked an iron plate. The judge opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. However, Bufong didn't give him a chance to say anything. He clenched his open palm into a fist and smashed it directly on the bridge of his nose. With a thud, the judge was bewildered. He was sent flying backward. Blood spurted from his nose. The sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy taste flooded the judge's face. Bufong wasn't reasonable, and he didn't want to be reasonable. No one could bully his apprentice chef. Thinking about Cece's aggrieved face, Bufong didn't stop moving. He punched again and again. His divine perception oppressed the judge, and the latter couldn't resist at all. It was a crazy scene. The onlookers shivered when they saw it. That judge was the heaven chief of the aristocratic families of the 5th layer. His cultivation base wasn't weak either. He had reached 5-star true immortal realm. However, he couldn't resist that young man at all. Could it be that he was a 9-star true immortal realm expert? But in the heaven chief realm, besides the masters of the various layers, who else was a 9-star true immortal realm expert? As soon as this thought appeared in their minds, suddenly they were all bewildered. They thought of someone squeak. The door of the assessment room was pushed open. A graceful figure walked in from outside. City Lord Meng Qi saw Bufong enter the room. She was a little curious, so she followed him in to see. As soon as she stepped in, she found that the atmosphere in the room was a little different. The sound of fists hitting flesh made City Lord Meng Qi bewildered. In the distance, Bufong raised his fist, his face expressionless. The rumbling noises caused everyone to feel a chill down their spines. That young man, is he the great demon? It's really the great demon. That country bumpkin girl is the great demon's apprentice chef? Oh my God, it's really the great demon. Domineering. The judges recognized Bufong. Many people in the audience also recognized Bufong. Instantly, they screamed and cheered. Now, in the immortal cooking realm, the name of the great demon king was known to everyone, and his name was like a thunderclap piercing their ears. After all, the great demon was the hope of the Heaven Chief realm, the great hero who saved the Heaven Chief realm from the brink of destruction. What are you doing? City Lord Meng Qi furrowed her brows, asking softly. Her voice was very gentle, echoing in the room. Meng Qi City Lord, say me. City Lord Meng Qi's voice rang out. A weak voice with a sobbing tone arose. The judge, who had been pressed to the ground by Bu Fong, finally spoke. Bu Fong paused his movements, glancing at Meng Qi. Then, he punched the judge's head deeply into the ground. Only then did he stand up. Waving his hand, his face was calm. Get lost. You don't have the right to be a judge. Bu Fong glanced at the judge, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, and said seriously. Meng Qi clasped her hands, looking at the fierce Bu Fong. Her face suddenly revealed a curious expression. Owner Bu actually had such a domineering side? City Lord Meng Qi, this person publicly assaulted a judge. City Lord, please punish him. That judge's face was covered in blood. He staggered as he stood up. His teeth were broken from the beating. City Lord Meng Qi, I'm from the Liu family. Bu Fong furrowed his brows. Was this guy complaining? He gently exhaled. Liu family? Really? You dare to offend the great demon? Meng Qi looked at the judge with a smile that was not a smile. Then, her eyes suddenly became sharp. Get lost. Go back to the Liu family and ask the head of the Liu family to go to the first layer of the Heaven Chief realm to beg for forgiveness. If the great demon doesn't forgive the Liu family, there is no need for the Liu family to exist. Meng Qi said coldly. After experiencing the calamity in the Heaven Chief realm, Meng Qi had already seen through the aristocratic families in the Heaven Chief realm. Her tone was filled with disgust. That group of trash dared to offend Bu Fong? She, Meng Qi, was now a genuine favored Fong faction. Even if Realm Lord Dit and Bu Fong fought, Meng Qi would not hesitate to stand on Bu Fong's side. When the people heard this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. It was indeed the great demon. However, City Lord Meng Qi was too exaggerated. Even if it was the great demon, there was no need for the head of the Liu family to personally come, right? Don't think that I'm joking. Meng Qi never joke around. You can try. Meng Qi indifferently glanced at the judge, causing him to shiver. Then, he covered his bloody face and crawled out of the assessment room. The people around felt the pressure increasing. Whether it was the great demon or City Lord Meng Qi, they were both big shots in the Heaven Chief realm. They didn't dare to offend either of them. Squeak. The chair was pulled out, and Bu Fong sat on it. Leaning against the chair, he indifferently looked at Cece on the stage. Cece, continue. An excellent chef won't be affected by the emotions of the outside world. Cooking is your only purpose. Bu Fong said. Cece nodded. You guys bring the dishes up. Now, I'm the judge, Bu Fong said. After saying that, he expressionlessly turned his head, glancing at the remaining judges and audience. I'm the judge. Any objections? No. The great demon, you have the final say. It's their honor to have you as a judge. How could the other judges dare to say no? They waved their hands, their faces full of smiles. Bu Fong turned his head to look at Meng Qi. Meng Qi's beautiful face bloomed into a smile. You have the final say. I'll support you. Very good. Bu Fong nodded. Then, Bu Fong retracted his gaze, looking at the group of contestants. They instantly trembled in fear. Rumble. Cece's dish was almost finished, and a thunderous roar resounded. Bu Fong's mind flickered. A magic array appeared out of thin air. Xiao Bai's burly figure appeared in the room. Xiao Bai, help Cece disperse the lightning for me, Bu Fong said. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. A moment later, he appeared next to Cece as if he had teleported. When the lightning struck, Xiao Bai's eyes focused. A purple lightning arc shot out from Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes, hitting the lightning punishment. The lightning punishment was blown away, and the tribulation clouds were scattered. The audience sucked in a breath of cold air. So terrifying. This was the great demon's heavenly immortal puppet. Bu Fong leaned on his chair, reaching out his finger to gently tap the table. This is my chef's apprentice. If you use normal methods to defeat her, I have no objections. But if you dare to bully her, be prepared to receive my wrath. Now, bring your dishes up. Let me see what kind of dishes you can cook for daring to mock my apprentice. Bu Fong's indifferent voice resounded in the room. Everybody's heart couldn't help but shiver. The great demon king was really protective of his own people. The teenagers who had mocked Cece were so scared that they couldn't even hold their dishes properly. How could a local steamed bun become an existence that couldn't be provoked? Chapter 1185. As the apprentice chef of the great demon, was it something to be envied? There was no doubt that it was. Nowadays, in the Heaven Chief realm, the most famous person was not the realm lord or the city lord, but the great demon. Whether it was in the Heaven Chief competition or stopping the Nether Prison's invasion, the great demon's fame had spread throughout the entire Heaven Chief realm. No one would not have heard of the name, the great demon. To be able to become the apprentice chef of a well-known figure was an honor and a kind of luck. Of course, Cece was still young. She did not understand how glorious it was to be Bufong's apprentice. However, in Cece's heart, she took Bufong as a role model. She wanted to become a chef like Bufong. This was her goal. Bufong's gaze was very sharp as it swept across the arena, causing the contestants in the arena to tremble in fear. Many people felt their hearts sink when they met Bufong's eyes. Then, they quickly looked away. On the contrary, Cece held her dish, proudly raising her head. She believed that her dish would never make teacher Bu lose face. Oh, right. I forgot to tell you. Bufong has just passed the evaluation of the Realm Lord, the City Lord, and me. He has passed the second grade Heaven Chief's test. Now, the Great Demon is already a third grade Heaven Chief. Mengqi clasped her hands, her immortal robe fluttering. Narrowing her eyes, she smiled and told everyone the news. Everyone was slightly stunned. A moment later, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The Great Demon had passed the second grade Heaven Chief's test? No. After passing the second grade Heaven Chief's test, how could he become a third grade Heaven Chief? Although the Great Demon was a hero, they couldn't open a back door for a hero. However, that was not right either. The Heaven Chief assessment could not be opened just because one wanted to. The will of the Heaven Tree also witnessed the process of the Heaven Chief assessment. Therefore, if one did not have the corresponding strength, it was impossible to become a third-grade Heaven Chief. In other words, after the Great Demon passed the second-grade Heaven Chief assessment, he also passed the third-grade Heaven Chief assessment. Was there such a thing? The group of people was instantly shocked. They did not dare to believe such a thought. All along, although the Great Demon was a hero, the Great Demon's culinary skills had always been criticized. Although the Great Demon had made a name for himself in the Heaven Chief competition, suppressing many monstrous geniuses to become the champion of the competition. But no matter how awesome the champion of the Heaven Chief competition was, he was just an immortal chef. Compared to the second-grade Heaven Chief or third-grade Heaven Chief, his culinary skills were still too weak. In the Heaven Chief realm, cooking skills were the most important. No matter how high one's true energy cultivation was, if one's culinary skills were not good enough, others would only fear you, but not respect you. However, now, the Great Demon's culinary skills had reached the third-grade Heaven Chief level. This is a big difference. In other words, the Great Demon had truly become an existence respected by many of the Heaven Chief realm's Heaven Chief realm. That's right. It's exactly as you think. After Bufong passed the second-grade Heaven Chief assessment, he also passed the third-grade Heaven Chief assessment. City Lord Mengqi said with a smile. As soon as City Lord Mengqi confirmed it, the whole audience exclaimed. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, feeling very incredulous. Everyone looked at Bufong in a different way. Trembling, the contestants brought out their dishes and placed them on the judge's table. Bufong glanced at the first contestant. It was a boy around 11 or 12 years old, the one who had laughed at Cece the loudest. Bufong had a deep impression of him. His fingertips gently tapped on the table, and the tapping sound rang out unceasingly. The boy stood not far from Bufong, his head lowered, not even daring to look at Bufong. Previously, he had laughed at Cece so loudly, and his voice was full of disdain and mockery. Now, Cece's mentor was sitting in front of him. It made him feel a little aggrieved. The river flows east for 30 years, and then west for 30 years. Sure enough, he couldn't look down on any potential stock. Raise your head and introduce your dish. Bufong stopped tapping on the table and said calmly. Instantly, the boy's body trembled and he straightened his chest. Honorable judges, this dish is my specialty. It's called jade glaze seed. It's made from the roe of a kind of sea fish, and it's mixed with many other processes. It's slowly stewed. As the boy spoke, his imposing manner gradually weakened under Bufong's gaze. He had to admit that this dish was really special. Using the roe to cook was a good idea. However, Bufong could see the flaw of this dish at first glance. Actually, the knife skills and the control of the heat were just average. Although it wasn't bad, it wasn't at the level of an immortal chef. It was mainly because of the ingredients. The roe alone had raised the level of this dish by a lot. However, Bufong didn't mind. The ingredients themselves could also be considered an aspect of a chef's skills. Finding good ingredients was also a skill. He didn't say anything. Many judges took out their porcelain spoons, scooping a spoonful of jade glaze seed into their mouths. As soon as it entered their mouths, there was a faint warmth. As soon as it entered their mouths, Bufong furrowed his brows. Glancing at the boy, the latter shivered. The other judges also furrowed their brows. Your dish only has the advantage of the ingredients. Whether it's the knife skills or the control of the flame, they're both lacking. I suggest that you refine it, Bufong said. The other judges exchanged looks. Although what Bufong said was true, it was too direct. Actually, under normal circumstances, this boy could barely pass the immortal chef test. However, since the great demon had spoken, no one dared to say anything else. Mengqi covered her mouth and smiled. Refine it? Bufong was really impolite. Although his comments were accurate, it felt like he was using his position to avenge a personal grudge. Mengqi's beautiful eyes looked at Bufong. Looking at Bufong leaning on the chair and seriously saying that he should refine it, she felt that he was a little cute. The boy opened his mouth. What should he say? He couldn't say anything, because what Bufong said was right. The ingredients were specially prepared for this test. He knew where his shortcomings were, so he planned to use ingredients to make up for them. However, he met Bufong. Despair. The first contestant was killed just like that. The others were trembling. The second contestant brought the dish to the table. After the judges tasted it, they would give their comments. As a judge, Bufong naturally wouldn't abuse his position. However, since he was a judge, the requirements of the dish test had become much stricter. At least, many people who wanted to try their luck and become an immortal chef were rejected by Bufong's words. Except for Cici, all the contestants had finished their dishes. Only 2 had passed the test. It could be said to be the strictest immortal chef test in history. However, the other contestants couldn't say anything. They had done this sin, so they had to bear it. Finally, it was Cici's turn. Everyone's indignant eyes fell on Cici. It was because of this country bumpkin that many of them couldn't pass the test. At this moment, many people looked like they wanted to watch a good show. Cici was just 7 years old. She was such a little girl, and she wasn't even as tall as the stove. What kind of dish could she cook? As far as they were concerned, the great demon king only wanted him to see the world. However, seeing the great demon's apprentice being eliminated, many people wanted to see Bufong's face. How ugly would it be? On the other hand, Mengqi was a little curious. She didn't have a deep impression of Cici. However, she was curious about what kind of dish Bufong, a monstrous disciple, could cook. Cici brought the dish up. Hot steam rose from the ground. It was a fish that had been fried in vinegar after being doused in hot oil. From the outside, it didn't look strange. Although it had immortal energy, it was just a wisp of immortal energy. It couldn't be considered shocking. This dish is called sweet and sour fish. Cici rubbed the corner of her clothes, speaking shyly. Originally, she wanted to introduce it with her head held high. However, when she saw Bufong's eyes, she was a little shy and scared. Thus, she simply introduced it. Many contestants who had been eliminated by Bufong sneered. These young men all had the temperament of youth. Naturally, they weren't happy about being eliminated by Bufong. Thus, even though they were facing the great demon, they still showed their dissatisfaction. Sweet and sour fish. One of the judges was a little curious. Sweet and sour fish was a dish that required a lot of skill. How could a 7-year-old girl make such a difficult dish, especially when she didn't have any immortal tools? Of course, the most important thing that aroused the curiosity of the judges was Cece's identity as the apprentice of the great demon. Being able to become the apprentice of the great demon, she must have something special about her. One of the judges reached out his chopsticks and picked up a piece of fish. The white and tender fish was flipped over, and dense steam rose from it. The orange sauce was sweet and sour. She picked up a piece of fish, dipped it in the sauce, and stuffed it into her mouth. The soft and tender flavor of the fish exploded. The degree of sweetness and sourness was just right. This made the judge's eyes suddenly light up. He looked at Cece in bewilderment. Was this dish really cooked by a 7-year-old girl? Her control of taste was almost no weaker than that of a second-grade heaven chief. Bufong picked up the fish and put it in his mouth. The delicious taste burst out, making him nod slightly. This was a rather mature dish. Cece had been helping in the kitchen of the Heaven Chief restaurant for a long time, and her cooking skills had improved greatly. After all, this little girl's talent was very good, and she had an immortal tongue. It was as if she was born to cook. Of course, this dish had its flaws, but compared to its merits, these flaws could not be mentioned. Thus, all the judges agreed that Cece became the immortal chef in the end. Sure enough, slow work produces fine work. Without immortal tools or convenient cooking utensils, as long as she cooked diligently, she could still cook delicious food. I don't accept this. However, just as Bufong announced that Cece had become the immortal chef, someone spoke up in dissatisfaction. The group of teenagers who had been eliminated by Bufong all protested against Bufong. They felt that Bufong was biased. Otherwise, how could a 7-year-old girl become the immortal chef? How could the record of the youngest immortal chef be broken so easily? Nonsense. How can you question the decision made by the judges? If your skills are not as good as hers, don't make a fool of yourself. A judge's face turned cold as he spoke directly. The group of teenagers who were protesting stopped abruptly. We don't accept this. Firstly, this little girl didn't have any immortal tools. Secondly, she didn't have a convenient immortal fire. Thirdly, she didn't have any top-grade ingredients. How could she become the immortal chef? If she can do it, why can't we? A teenager glared at them, his face red as he said, discontentedly. They felt that Bufong had shielded Cece. Mengqi furrowed her brows, looking at Bufong. She wanted to see how Bufong would solve this problem. The atmosphere suddenly froze. Many people stared at Bufong. Cece's eyes were filled with tears again. How could these people question her cooking skills? When she was diligently practicing her knife skills, who knew where they were sleeping? The sound of a chair being pushed rang out. The entire place fell into silence once again. Bufong stood up, glancing at the group of stubborn teenagers who were not convinced. Slowly, he walked to Cece, reaching out his hand to touch Cece's head. In the next moment, his gaze suddenly became sharp. How dare you question my, Bufong's, apprentice chef? If you have the guts to question me, come out. If you have the guts to question me, then have a chef's challenge with my apprentice chef. Bufong said calmly. He raised his eyes, his pressure pressing down. Chef's challenge. Cece was stunned. The teenagers were stunned as well. The judges also sucked in a deep breath. The great demon was really going overboard. If his apprentice lost, it would cause an unforgettable trauma to his soul. Good. Chef's challenge it is. She's just a little girl. Why would we be afraid of her? No immortal tools, no cooking utensils, no immortal flame. We will definitely crush her. The teenagers' eyes suddenly lit up. They straightened their necks, shouting excitedly. The surrounding judges sucked in a breath of cold air again, looking at that teenager. It was really, newborn calves were not afraid of tigers. Mengqi also shook her head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. These teenagers really did not know how to write the word despair. Cooking utensils, immortal tools, immortal flames. These, how could the great demon lack them? It should be known that This chef challenge was created by the great demon. Bufong narrowed his eyes, indifferently looking at that teenager. Very good. In that case, Cece, let him feel despair. Don't give me face. Beat him hard, Bufong said. Then his mind flickered. A magic array flashed. The crystal knife cabinet emerged from the magic array. Bufong slapped the cabinet's door, and instantly, thousands of strands of immortal energy surged. Beams of knife light shone brilliantly. Cece, you can choose from an eyes in my cabinet, whether you want a supreme-grade immortal tool or a high-grade one. I have both, Bufong said gently, rubbing Cece's head. The teenagers were dumbfounded. Looking at the dazzling knife cabinet, they could only curse in their hearts. Chapter 1186. Ordinary people didn't know how many cooking utensils Bufong had. However, looking at the dazzling array of kitchen knives in the cupboard, Bufong thought that he would not treat his apprentices shabbily. At first, those youths were just acting on impulse. They thought that if Cece, a 7-year-old girl, could pass the test, why couldn't they? Their dishes had immortal energy. Although their cooking methods and skills were a little weak, it couldn't be denied that their dishes were delicious. Not bad. That's enough. In the end, the chef's challenge didn't start. Cece wasn't afraid. When she heard that Bufong let her pick a kitchen knife, she was so excited. She seriously picked a kitchen knife from the cabinet and chose a delicate and small kitchen knife that was as transparent as a cicada's wing. The kitchen knife had immortal energy wrapped around it, so its grade was naturally not low. As for the wok, stove, and other things, Bufong also prepared them for Cece and took them out. In the eyes of those youths, Cece quickly changed from a country bumpkin who didn't have any equipment and background to a big boss. Looking at the kitchen knife that was as thin as a cicada's wing in Cece's right hand, which was overflowing with immortal energy, and the big wok in her left hand, there was also a stove that emitted a majestic pressure in front of her. Those youths had long lost the interest and intention to continue the chef's challenge. Chef challenge my ass. They thought that the other party was a country bumpkin, but in the end, they found out that the other party was using a cheat. Hence, these youths were tactful and didn't choose to continue the chef challenge. Otherwise, they would soon understand the despair that Bufong said, the despair that they would lose even their underwear. The group of youths left dejectedly. No one laughed at them. It was mainly because Cece was the great demon's disciple, which was the biggest cheat. Otherwise, with those naughty youth's character, wouldn't it be easy to kill Cece? Mengqi also didn't expect that Bufong would actually scare away this group of brats just like that. In fact, Mengqi missed this feeling. When she took the immortal chef test with a group of friends, she was also very nervous and uneasy. There was the joy of success, but there was also the sorrow of failure. But without a doubt, this memory was hidden deep in his heart. The immortal chef assessment ended just like that. Cece was so excited that her face turned red. She held the kitchen utensils that Bufong gave her, and her small eyes shone brightly. The 3 contestants who had passed the immortal chef test stood in the arena. The judges took the chef robe specially provided for the immortal chef, which symbolized the glory of the Heaven Chief, and handed it to each contestant who passed the assessment. Bufong leaned on the chair, looking at the smiling Cece in the arena. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. When Cece showed off the Heaven Chief robe and ran over, Bufong mercilessly attacked her. The main reason was that the Heaven Chief robe wasn't on the same level as the vermilion robe on Bufong's body. However, Bufong was also hesitant. When he passed the immortal chef test, why didn't anyone give him the Heaven Chief robe? Were they looking down on him? After distributing the chef robes, the judges walked over respectfully, talking to Bufong. Some talked about cooking skills, while others talked about the current situation. All in all, these judges were very respectful to the great demon. Mengqi didn't say much, smiling as she turned around and left. This matter was just an interlude. She just wanted to see how Bufong would solve it. As for this kind of thing, it was impossible to give Bufong a headache. After talking with the judges for a while, Bufong used his unapproachable eyes to force the judges, who still wanted to talk, to leave. Then, he left the Heaven Chief Hall with Cece. After leaving the Heaven Chief Hall, the two of them returned to the Heaven Chief Restaurant. This time, the trip to the Heaven Chief Hall, Bufong became the third-grade Heaven Chief, and Cece became the immortal chef, which was a good result. Little Hu lay on Bufong's shoulder again, using his furry foxtail to stroke Bufong's cheek. Bufong took out an explosive meatball, stuffing it into Little Hu's mouth. By the time they returned to the Heaven Chief Restaurant, the sky was getting dark. Bufong, on the other hand, told Cece to have a good rest. This little girl must be tired today. However, the little girl was full of energy. She gathered her strength and went into the kitchen, wearing her new chef robe. Carrying the kitchen utensils that Bufong gave her, she began to practice cooking. Bufong watched for a while, giving some advice to Cece. Then he began to cook a dish of sweet and sour ribs. He placed the delicious sweet and sour ribs in front of the Lord Go. The Lord Go, who was still eating and sleeping, didn't change his love for the sweet and sour ribs, gobbling down the food on the porcelain plate. After doing all this, Bufong went upstairs. A yawn rang out. Nethery poked her head out of the room. Her eyes were sleepy, and her black hair was messy. She didn't look like a goddess at all. She seemed to see Bufong. Nethery's black eyes focused. Then, she retracted her head and slammed the door shut with a loud bang. Bufong was confused. He opened the door opposite Yu's room and entered the room. Dense steam rose up. Bufong walked out of the bathroom. His hair was wet, and he was wrapped in a bathrobe, revealing his white chest. He took out the teapot, took out a 9-revolution Great Path tea, and threw it into the pot. The boiling spring of life was poured in, and a sizzling sound rang out. The 9-revolution Great Path tea, which had shrunk into a single grain, instantly dispersed, filling the entire teapot. A thick aroma wafted out. Swish! Bufong's wet hair was tied up with a velvet rope. He poured the green tea from the teapot into a blue and white porcelain cup. The cool tea seemed to reflect his figure, and the bubbles on it quietly burst. Steam rose, and the aroma of the tea filled the air. Smelling it, one would feel a sense of tranquility. Bufong sat on the soft bed, quietly savoring this good tea. The bitter taste of the tea spread in his mouth, and the warmth that instantly poured into his heart was unforgettable. Bufong savored the cup of tea for a long time. In just a short while, he finished the tea in the teapot. Swish! Once again, he poured the boiling spring of life into the teapot. Bufong directly held the teapot, drinking the tea. This rough way of drinking tea had a different taste. His mind flickered. Bufong carried the teapot, entering the heaven and earth farmland. A cool breeze blew, blowing the green grass on the ground, causing it to sway unceasingly. It was as if a wave was set off, rustling. Bufong was wearing a bathrobe, and his hair was still dripping wet. However, Bufong clasped one hand behind his back, and the other hand was holding the teapot, drinking tea. It was a different taste. Soon, they arrived in front of the wooden house. Jing Yuan had just taken the milk and was about to go back. After saying goodbye to Bufong, she disappeared. Recently, Jing Yuan had basically mastered the gourmet ice cream that Bufong had taught her. Now, she had begun to personally study the ice cream style, and so on. After Jing Yuan left, Niu Han-san walked over, wearing a pair of crystal glasses. The two of them once again began to study the carrier of the imprisoned gourmet array. The 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm, the branches of the Heaven Tree pierced through the body of a nether prison expert, standing at the entrance of the Bronze Gate. It seemed to form an incomparably terrifying power. The 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm, which was originally a stretch of yellow sand, had turned into ruins. At this moment, the shape of a city had begun to appear. However, this city seemed to be a defensive city. After all, if the nether prison experts attacked again, the 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm would be the first to bear the brunt. Therefore, the 5th floor was basically not built as a prosperous city, but a city based on the tone of war. It could resist the attack of an army. Realm Lord Dit had experienced despair once, and he didn't want to experience it a second time. After staying in a greenhouse for too long, these experts of the Heaven Chief realm had forgotten the glory of the past. They needed hot blood, battles, and real training. The city walls were very simple, and there were even model cracks on them. The main reason was that the materials used to build the city walls were the dilapidated stones of the original immortal city of the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. There was a pressure left behind by the little saint experts after the battle, which served as a warning. Today, the immortal city was heavily guarded. Almost all the troops of the Heaven Chief Realm were stationed there. There were also sentries standing on the city walls, coldly observing all the enemies. The bronze gate, which was blocked by the branches of the Heaven Tree, suddenly emitted a deafening creaking sound. The 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm suddenly became restless. Everyone's eyes shrank as they looked in the direction of the bronze gate. The two towering city walls were separated by an endless abyss, and there was only a heaven nether bridge connecting the two ends of the abyss. All of a sudden, the sentries on the city walls tensed up, their eyes fixed on the towering city walls. Under the bronze gate, their pitch-black figures slowly walked out from under the branches of the Heaven Tree. The branches of the Heaven Tree almost blocked half of the bronze gate, but it still left a small passage. There were not many figures, only two. Both were wrapped in black cloaks, making it hard to see their faces. As the sandstorm on the 5th level blew, the robes of the experts wrapped in black cloaks also started to flutter. Enemy attack. The sentries on the city walls suddenly roared. The roar was like a thunderclap, exploding in the entire immortal city. After shouting, the sentries walked to a corner of the city walls, where a huge black bell hung. Gathering the true energy in his body, he punched the big bell. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of the bell lingered. The entire immortal city instantly boiled. In the immortal city, figures broke through the air. Very quickly, they sped over, landing on the city walls. The cultivation of these figures was quite strong. Following the recovery of the Heaven Chief Realm, many experts had completed their bottlenecks. Yaya was wearing a tight outfit, her golden hair spread out. She was now the city lord of the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm, and also the first line of defense against the enemies. Creak! Yaya's face was cold. She waved her hand. Instantly, the guards on the city walls pulled their longbows, their sharp arrows aimed at the two nether prison experts wrapped in black cloaks. Halt your steps. Does the nether prison really want to start a war? Yaya's cold voice rang out, lingering over the city walls. As soon as the words came out, the two nether prison experts stopped in their tracks. At this moment, they were standing right in the middle of the Heaven Nether Bridge. The leader raised his head, raised his hand, and took off the hood of his cloak, revealing a delicate and pretty face. His white hair fluttered in the wind. Chapter 1187. An Invitation? Realm Lord Dit frowned as he held the black invitation between his fingers. It was not made of paper, but a mysterious black ore. It was extremely exquisite, and its surface was painted with strange patterns. Of course, that was not the point. The point was the content of the invitation. The content of the invitation was the key. It was also the main reason why Realm Lord Dit's expression changed. Inge smiled gently. He seemed to be very satisfied with Realm Lord Dit's expression. Of course, he also understood that no one could remain calm after reading the content of the invitation. The main reason was that the content was too shocking. Yaya seemed to be a little surprised by the change in Realm Lord Dit's expression. She looked over, puzzled. The cynical look on Realm Lord Dit's face had disappeared. Frowning, he read the content of the invitation. The content was engraved with golden characters. At first glance, Yaya seemed to be in a trance. However, she saw a few familiar words. For example, the abyss, the relic, the competition. These words instantly aroused Yaya's interest. Yaya had been in charge of sorting out the information of the Heaven Chief Realm, so she thought of the content of the invitation through these few words. Her eyes widened in an instant, and she looked at Realm Lord Dit in disbelief. Your Highness, could this invitation be the invitation to the Abyssal Chilan Chef Feast? The Abyssal Chilan Chef Feast was a real feast. All the Chilan chefs of another chef clan, the Chelan chefs of the Heaven Chief realm, and the Earth prison would attend this feast. Of course, if it was just a feast, not everyone would go. The main reason was the purpose of this feast was to open the divine chef's relic. The relic, it was no stranger to the people of the Heaven Chief realm. In the immortal cooking realm, there were many ruins, and these ruins were scattered in the wilderness. They were the legacies left by some ancient Chelan chefs or divine chefs. In fact, it was mainly because the Chelan chefs and the divine chefs of the Heaven Chief realm had fallen in a catastrophe. They had fallen too fast, so they didn't have time to prepare the land of inheritance. But now, the Nether Chef clan had sent someone to deliver an invitation to the Abyssal Chelan Chef feast. What was his goal? What were these people trying to do? Today, the Heaven Chief realm and Nether prison were absolute opposites. Nether prison was extremely powerful, and its Nether Chef clan was powerful enough to destroy the Heaven Chief realm. However, now that the Heaven Tree in the Heaven Chief realm had recovered, and the power of the Heaven Tree was comparable to that of the Great Sage, the Nether Chef clan had not succeeded in invading it. But that was why it was even more impossible for the Nether prison to send them an invitation to the Abyssal Chelan Chef feast. Realm Lord, this is a trap. Yaya's pupils shrank as she made her judgment in an instant. It was a trap set by the Nether Chef clan's experts, and they wanted Realm Lord Dit to jump into it. The main reason was that he believed that no Chelan chef could resist the temptation of the divine chef's remains. This was also one of the reasons why Shadowstream was so confident. Realm Lord, the invitation has been delivered, so I'll take my leave now. I don't think you'll keep me here. When two armies fight, envoys are not to be killed. I hope I can fight with the geniuses of the Heaven Chief realm. The Heaven Chief realm in the future, Shadowstream said with a smile. His white hair fluttered in the wind, making his face look even more handsome. Standing beside him, Luya's face was cold, as if he had sensed the unfriendly gazes on the city wall. A black light flashed in his hand. The next moment, a kitchen knife that looked like a watermelon appeared in his hand, and his killing intent soared into the sky. He was not afraid to fight against the city alone. Realm Lord, think about it carefully. You only have 3 days. If you miss this opportunity, it will be really difficult for you to touch the opportunity to break through. Inge said with a smile. After speaking, his body suddenly shot forward from the Heaven Nether Bridge. He turned into a black cannonball and sped toward the bronze gate. Before long, he went behind it. Yaya looked at the two disappearing figures with some reluctance. There is no doubt that those two should be the top geniuses of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef clan. The aura they exuded was extremely terrible. If he was able to capture those two people, it could be considered as a bargaining chip. Unfortunately, those two were too cunning. Realm Lord Dit fell silent. He didn't say anything. Yaya looked at him worriedly. Realm Lord, this is definitely a trap of the Nether prison. If you go in person and are intercepted and captured by the Nether prison experts, it will be a disaster for our Heaven Chief realm. Yaya said seriously. Realm Lord Dit put away the invitation and sighed. He didn't answer Yaya, but just looked at the towering Nether prison city wall in the distance. What did the Nether Chef clan want to do? We'll talk when we get back to the city, Realm Lord Dit said. As soon as he said that, he grabbed the invitation, turned, and shot into the city. Yaya had no choice but to order the others to guard the city and follow Realm Lord Dit. Realm Lord Dit didn't discuss this matter in the 5th layer. Instead, he returned to the 1st layer of the Heaven Chief realm and went to the Heaven Chief Hall. He called Mengqi, Gongshu Baiguang, the Zhou Lords, and the other higher-ups of the Heaven Chief realm to discuss this important matter. Yes, this matter was definitely a big deal, and it was a very big deal. After all, it involved the Divine Chef's remains and the Divine Chef's inheritance. For Chelan chefs, this matter was too tempting, and it made Realm Lord Dit a little tempted. Regarding this matter, Yaya was firmly against it. Gongshu Baiguang didn't have the level of a Chelan chef, so after thinking about it carefully, he also opposed it. City Lord Mengqi and the Zhou Lords fell into silence. Only they would understand the difficulty of being a Chelan chef and how terrible the temptation of a divine chef was. No wonder this opportunity made Realm Lord Dit hesitate. It was indeed rare. In the end, the decision became 2-2. Realm Lord Dit was once again caught in a dilemma. In fact, Realm Lord Dit knew very well that this invitation was probably a trap. Once he left the Heaven Chief realm and lost the protection of the Heaven Tree, he would probably be captured or even killed by a Nether Prison Great Sage. As the backbone of the Heaven Chief realm, if he fell, the whole Heaven Chief realm would fall into complete chaos. This was a risk, but opportunity and risk coexisted. This was the reason why Realm Lord Dit was in a dilemma. After all, the Heaven Chief realm really needed a divine chef. In the conference room of the Heaven Chief Hall, people were quarreling. Although Gongshu Baiguang's status wasn't as high as the others, he also argued. This decision was too important, so he had to be very cautious. As Realm Lord Dit said, the Heaven Chief realm needed a divine chef, but the Heaven Chief realm couldn't do without a Realm Lord. All right, stop arguing. This decision is indeed a little difficult to make. Realm Lord Dit stroked his chin and said, if we agree to the invitation, we must go to the Abyss. Although the Abyss is not in the Nether Prison, it has been occupied by the Nether Prison tens of thousands of years ago. This trip will be full of danger, so Your Excellency can't go. Yaya and Gongshu Baiguang said, Your Excellency, if you can become a divine chef, you could try it. Opportunity always coexists with risk. The Heaven Chief realm has been peaceful for too long. Mengqi and Zhou lords expressed their opinions. Realm Lord Dit frowned and took a deep breath. Then his eyes lit up. Forget it. We can't get anything from arguing here. Let's go find someone, Realm Lord Dit said. Everyone was stunned. They didn't understand what Realm Lord Dit meant. However, Mengqi quickly came back to her senses. She understood who Realm Lord Dit was referring to. This was a good decision. In the first layer of the Heaven Chief realm, Heaven Chief restaurant, Bu Fong leisurely sat on a chair in front of the restaurant, curling up. The warm sunlight shone down, making Bu Fong feel a little relaxed and leisurely. Bu Fong curled up on the chair, holding a teapot in his hand. From time to time, he would pour the cool tea into his mouth. The aroma of the tea flowed into his mouth, making him feel very comfortable. This kind of leisurely life was really irresistible. No one knew when Lord Go had crawled out of the restaurant. He was lying in front of the door, basking in the warm sunlight, squinting his dog eyes with a lazy face. Little Huli was lying on Bu Fong's shoulder, wagging his foxtail. All of a sudden, in the distance, several figures slowly approached. Sensing the familiar aura of these people, Bu Fong couldn't help but open his eyes. It was rare for these people to appear at the same time. Bu Fong opened his eyes a slit. Looking into the distance, he saw Realm Lord Dit and the others walking toward him. They also saw Bu Fong, who was curled up on the chair, leisurely. Seems like you're very relaxed. Are you satisfied after becoming a third-grade Heaven Chief? Realm Lord Dit said, flicking his golden hair. The others looked worried, but they just nodded at Bu Fong. I'm just cultivating my mind. Bu Fong was no longer sleeping. He took a sip of tea, which had a rich aroma. He gently exhaled a breath of hot air, and his chest felt warm. Tell me, why did you come to me with such great fanfare? Bu Fong asked. Well, I'll say this in advance. I won't lend you a perishing pot. Look at you, you're so stingy. Realm Lord Dit rolled his eyes. Do I look like the kind of person who would borrow a perishing pot from you? Including yesterday, you've borrowed a perishing pot from me 18 times in the past month. But I refuse all of them. Bu Fong said with a straight face. Fine. You don't know how to share good things. Look, this Realm Lord has brought something good to share with you. Realm Lord Dit said. After speaking, his hand shook and a pitch-black invitation appeared. The invitation was shrouded in pitch-black nether chi. Huh? Bu Fong's eyes narrowed. Without a doubt, the thing in Realm Lord Dit's hand did not belong to the Heaven Chief realm. Lord Go, who was lying not far away, also opened his sleepy eyes, looking a little surprised. Why do you have this thing? Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice rang out. What is this? Bu Fong asked curiously. Lord Go seemed to be quite familiar with this thing. That's the pass to the abyss. Bufong boy, isn't your abyssal chili sauce produced in the abyss? These two abysses are the same abyss. Lord Go yawned. Yes, this shameless dog is right. This is the pass to the abyss, Realm Lord Dit said. However, this thing was sent here by a divine chef from the Nether Chef clan. It's an invitation to the Chelan Chef feast. Although the feast is nominally an exchange banquet, it's actually a banquet specially held for the divine chef's remains and inheritance. Realm Lord Dit took a deep breath and said, he looked hopefully at Bufong and said, Bufong, my little friend, do you think I should go or not? Bufong furrowed his brows. The invitation was sent by a divine chef from the Nether Chef clan? Even an idiot would know that there's a conspiracy. Why would Realm Lord Dit ask such a stupid question? Bufong rolled his eyes and said, go to court death? No, you should go. Just when Bufong rejected Realm Lord Dit, Lord Dog, who was lying on the side, crawled up. His eyes shone brightly as he spoke solemnly. Everyone was taken aback as they turned to look. They saw the gleam in Lord Go's eyes, as if he had thought of something exciting. There was no doubt that this dog with a story was going to stir up trouble again. Chapter 1188. In the end, Realm Lord Dit decided to go to the abyss. After all, it had been too long since a divine chef had appeared in Heaven Chief Realm. For Realm Lord Dit, the relic and inheritance of a divine chef was a great temptation, which made Dit want to go to the abyss despite the urge to be killed by nether prison experts. Lord Go's decision was like the last straw that crushed his will. So, he made up his mind. No matter how Mengqi and Zhou lords objected, he didn't want to go to the abyss. Bufong didn't approve of Realm Lord Dit going to the abyss. After all, the invitation was sent by a nether prison expert. There was no doubt that the other party had dug a big hole for Realm Lord Dit to jump into. If he lost his life, so what if he obtained the divine chef's relic and the inheritance? This was something that made people very conflicted. Therefore, Bufong didn't say anything. He respected Dit's decision. The abyss is a good place. Lord Dog lay down on the ground once again and said with a grunt, Bufong, my little friend, do you want to go with me? Realm Lord Dit glanced at Bufong and asked sincerely before leaving. However, Bufong only rolled his eyes. Naturally, he chose not to go. Right now, he just wanted to quietly stay in the store, open the store for business, drink tea, and bask in the warm sun. Realm Lord Dit felt it was a pity. He had wanted to bring Bufong with him. If Bufong went, that mangy dog might go as well, and he wouldn't have to worry about being killed by nether prison experts. However, it was obvious that Bufong didn't want to go. Realm Lord Dit and the others left. Since they had decided to go, they naturally had to make some preparations. There was a teleportation array in Heaven Chief Realm that led to the abyss, but it could only send them to the nearest big city. If they wanted to go to the abyss from the city, they needed to rent an abyssal winged dragon. That big city was a mixture of netherworld creatures, creatures from other continents, and creatures from the abyss. It was a chaotic city. A broken order and a world full of slaughter were the most realistic portrayal of that city. In fact, after Nether Prison occupied the abyss, it had taken all the resources in the abyss for thousands of years, which was equivalent to giving up on the abyss. It didn't manage the order of the abyss or the slaughter there. It just let it develop freely. In the end, it developed into the current abyss, a chaotic and disorderly slaughter city. The Heaven Chief Hall was the Realm Lord's residence. Today, the Immortal Kitchen Pavilion was the residence of the Realm Lord. As the times changed, the focus of the whole immortal cooking realm had shifted from the 5th layer to the 1st layer. This time, Realm Lord Ditai planned to go to the abyss alone, but he was rejected. Mengqi decided to go with them. At the start, Realm Lord Dit rejected it. However, the others all voted the same way. Hence, in the end, only 2 people were chosen to head to the Dark Abyss: City Lord Mengqi and Realm Lord Dit. The 2 of them returned to their respective places and began to prepare for their trip. Bufong was leisurely lying on a chair, holding a teapot in his hand and taking a sip from time to time. The taste of the 9 Revolution Heavenly Tao tea was wonderful. As soon as it entered his mouth, Bufong felt as though his mind had been refreshed. Bufong was curious about the abyss, but this was only because the abyss was where the abyssal chili sauce was produced. Speaking of which, Bufong should be curious about the abyssal chili sauce. For example, Bufong had cultivated the exploding flame pepper in the heaven and earth farmland. However, the chili sauce made from the exploding flame pepper was much worse than the abyssal chili sauce. The main problem was that the taste was always lacking a hint of meaning. Suddenly, Bufong, who was lying on the chair, could not help but open his eyes. He suddenly thought of a serious matter. Realm Lord Dit was going to the abyss to get the opportunity to break through to the Divine Chef realm, which was the Divine Chef's relic that had just appeared in the abyss. This was very tempting to Realm Lord Dit, but to Bufong, it seemed to be equally tempting. Normally, shouldn't the system have already issued a temporary task? Bufong thought to himself. He had just finished all the temporary tasks recently. If I'm not wrong, just as his mind flickered, the solemn voice of the system resounded in his mind. Bufong couldn't help but roll his eyes. Sure enough, did the system forget about it? Did it only issue a temporary task after I reminded it? Bufong had a feeling that it was possible. Temporary task. Go to the abyss and find the dark Qilin bone in the abyss's relic. Task reward. Increase the level of true energy by 20%. The system's voice ended. Bufong couldn't help but roll his eyes when he saw the reward of the temporary task. The task reward is really casual. However, a 20% increase in the level of true energy was still a huge temptation for the current Bufong. At least, it would reduce his turnover. Bufong's cultivation base was at 9-star true immortal realm, and he had 20% of his true energy. If that was converted into nether crystals and crystals, how much would that be? So, although the reward was a little casual, it was still very generous. The appearance of the system's temporary task actually made Bufong waver. He didn't plan to go. However, the reward of the temporary task and his curiosity about the abyssal chili sauce made Bufong decide to go to the abyss. Besides, Bufong had a feeling that the trip to the abyss would be very unusual. The system wanted him to find the dark Qilin bone. A Qilin was also an ancient spirit beast. The dark Qilin, on the other hand, was a variant of a Qilin. It was also an ancient spirit beast, so it couldn't be underestimated. Since he was going to the abyss, he naturally didn't have time to lie down. Although Bufong also wanted to have some leisure time. However, life was always busy. His mind flickered. Bufong's figure appeared in the heaven and earth farmland. He and Johan-san had a small breakthrough on the carrier of the confinement array. What dish should he use to carry the confinement array? Bufong and Johan-san had studied for a long time and tried many dishes and ingredients. In the end, they decided on a dish, crescent moon dumplings. Originally, Bufong wanted to try it with soup dumplings. However, although the effect of soup dumplings was good, it still had some shortcomings as a dish to carry the gourmet array. Facing these shortcomings, Bufong finally changed more than a dozen dishes around the soup dumplings. Then, he decided on the crescent moon dumplings. He came to the wooden house. Johan-san had already ground the flour to make the crescent moon dumplings. This flour contained the will of the Great Path, which was very unusual. Seeing Bufong appear, Johan-san immediately became excited. He showed the ground flour to Bufong. Bufong nodded and asked for 1 caddy of demon beef. After picking some immortal vegetables in the vegetable garden, he began to make crescent moon dumplings. Bufong was actually no stranger to making dumplings. Back in the Light Wind Empire, Bufong had cooked dumplings. That time, during the Hunter family banquet, Bufong made rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings. It conquered everyone. Now, Bufong also wanted to make rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings. However, the change in the ingredients also changed the grade of the dish. After adding the spring of life, the flour looked very sparkling and translucent, as if it was overflowing with color. As for the dumpling filling, it needed to be minced and mixed with Daistock's demon meat. Only then would it be complete. Johan-san stood in the distance, watching Bufong make the rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings. Bufong's movements were as smooth as flowing water. Even Johan-san found it pleasing to watch. While Bu Fong was making the dumplings, Jing Yuan came to fetch milk again. Recently, in Gata City, Fong Fong ice cream shop's business seemed to have improved again. Because Jing Yuan had researched many new ice cream styles, it set off a craze for eating ice. Gurgle, gurgle. In the black turtle constellation walk, the spring of life was boiling. Bu Fong put the wrapped dumplings into the wok. These dumplings were all wrapped into the shape of a crescent moon. As the hot water boiled, the dumplings gradually emitted a radiance. The seven-colored radiance looked very dazzling. Sizzle. He fished out the dumplings, drained them, and placed them on a blue and white porcelain plate. The dumplings were finished. Bu Fong took the crystal fruits of life, which were carved with the gourmet array, and put them into the dumplings. Just like that, the dish with the imprisoned gourmet array was finished. When Bu Fong added the imprisoned gourmet array to the dried pot, its effect was a little weaker. However, this rainbow-colored crescent moon dumpling should be stronger than the dried pot. Of course, its destructive power couldn't be compared to the perishing pot. Bu Fong collected the dumplings one by one. In his hand, a rainbow-colored crescent moon dumpling floated. Johan-san followed Bu Fong, and the two of them walked out of the cabin. In the distance, 80 and the 8 Treasures pig were playing, while the three-eyed wild lion followed a chicken and a pig, jumping up and down. Bu Fong's eyes locked on 80, who was running wildly. 80 seemed to feel its body light up. It felt the chef's gaze. "It's you, 80. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth rose, and he smiled gently. Johan-san also revealed a playful smile. "This chicken is really noisy." Bu Fong flicked his finger, and a seven-colored streamer shot out from his hand. In the next instant, it turned into an arc as it shot towards 80 at high speed. In the distance, 80's chicken eyes widened, and it clucked. It flapped its wings, and a few feathers fell off. Then it turned around and ran wildly. The chicken's head kept moving forward, and its speed was very fast. The 8 Treasures pig was dumbfounded. The three-eyed wild lion lay on the ground, not moving an inch. The green grass was moving. 80 was running wildly. Behind the 8 Treasures chicken, there was a dumpling that emitted a 7-colored radiance. The dumpling had locked onto 80's body, so no matter how 80 tried to dodge, it couldn't. In the end, the 8 Treasures chicken sat on the ground. The food in the heaven and earth farmland was too good, and 80 had become fatter. It was no longer the same 80 from before. The 7-colored crescent moon dumpling shot over, hitting 80's head. Thud! 80's eyes moved, puzzled. All of a sudden, the 7-colored crescent moon dumpling emitted a dazzling radiance. Buzz! In the next instant, 80 found that it was enveloped by a circular light pillar. Little 8's figure could not move at all. Only the wind blew, and the feathers on its body fluttered in the wind. Cluck, cluck, cluck. 80's eyes rolled, and its face was bewildered. It let out a muffled cluck. It wanted to move, but it couldn't move at all. When Bu Fong and Johan-san saw 80 being enveloped by the transparent light pillar, they couldn't help but clench their fists. They began to count the time. From the beginning to the end, 80 had been confined for about half an incense stick's worth of time. 80 was almost fully developed, and it could be considered a real immortal ingredient. Moreover, 80's food was especially good, so it was one of the top immortal ingredients. It was not bad to be able to confine it for so long. Half an incense stick's worth of time was enough for Bu Fong to cook a chicken into a dish. He put away the 7-colored crescent moon dumpling with satisfaction. Although the effect of the dumpling might be weaker against a stronger opponent, it could only trap a half-step saint for a dozen breaths. Against the little saint, it could only trap 2 or 3 breaths. Against the great sage, it couldn't even trap him for a single breath. However, at least it was one of Bu Fong's tricks. If the 7-colored crescent moon dumpling was used with the perishing pot, after immobilizing the enemy, he could smash them with the pot. With the 7-colored crescent moon dumpling, Bu Fong's confidence in going to the abyss increased. And with the 7-colored crescent moon dumpling, Bu Fong could stir up trouble in the abyss. Chapter 1189. 3 days wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. Realm Lord Dit and Mengqi were going to the abyss. Facing that chaotic place, full of slaughter, they naturally had to make some preparations. These preparations were for them to survive in that chaotic city. In these 3 days, Bu Fong naturally prepared a lot of things. Perishing pot, bursting meatballs, and rainbow crescent moon dumplings. These death food tools could even save Bu Fong's life at a critical moment and help Bu Fong solve a lot of difficulties. After preparing all this, Bu Fong practiced how to use the rainbow crescent moon dumplings in the heaven and earth farmland. Bu Fong wasn't sure what the effects and functions of the rainbow crescent moon dumplings were. This thing wasn't like the perishing pot, which only had one function: destruction and explosion. As for the new death food tool, Bu Fong felt that he had to think of a name. The rainbow crescent moon dumplings were too ordinary. After rubbing his chin and discussing with Nyohan San for a while, he decided to call the new death food tool Divine Seal Dumplings. It was a very domineering name, and Bu Fong was also very satisfied. Compared to the perishing pot, the name Divine Seal Dumplings wasn't inferior at all. After returning to the restaurant, Bu Fong could only wait for the time to go to the abyss. 3 days passed quickly. Bu Fong stayed in the small restaurant and waited for a long time. Bu Fong was slightly dumbfounded when he heard the sound of a burst of light. Realm Lord Dit and City Lord Mengqi actually set off. What about him? The corners of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. He seemed to have forgotten to tell Dit that he was also going to the abyss. As a result, Realm Lord Dit and Mengqi didn't wait for Bu Fong and directly set off. This was a little awkward. Since he couldn't go with Dit and the other realm lords, Bu Fong could only go by himself. It was naturally more convenient to go by himself. The system's teleportation array could bring Bu Fong there. After returning to the restaurant, Bu Fong gave some instructions to Cece before returning to his room. However, just as Bu Fong was about to summon the system's teleportation array, there was a knock on the door. Bu Fong was stunned. He stopped what he was doing and opened the door. He happened to see you standing at the door, her pitch-black eyes staring at Bu Fong. What happened? Bu Fong asked in confusion. This was the first time Nethery had knocked on his door. He guessed that she had something to tell him. He looked at Bu Fong. His black hair fell to his waist, and he wore a black dress that revealed his fair legs. Are you going to the abyss? Nethery asked with a cold face. Bu Fong was stunned. He didn't expect you to ask such a question. However, thinking about it, you must have known about it when Realm Lord Dit was discussing with him. Bu Fong nodded. He didn't deny it. He really wanted to go to the abyss. Seeing Bu Fong nod, Yu's eyes brightened. Bring me there, Nethery said in a concise and comprehensive manner. Bu Fong was stunned again. You want to go to the abyss? Why? However, Yu didn't answer him. She just stared at Bu Fong, causing Bu Fong's scalp to have goosebumps. My netherworld ship can bring you there. Yu's red lips parted slightly, saying. Bu Fong rubbed his head, but he didn't refuse. All right, then let's go. Bu Fong seemed a little helpless. He really didn't think that you want to go there. Anyway, it's good that you go. Yu's curse needs to be suppressed by his own dishes. Of course, Bu Fong was still doubtful. Could it be that you had some connection with the abyss? You stepped into Bu Fong's room. Her mind flickered. A corner of the gigantic netherworld ship emerged from the void. Yu's figure floated up, landing on the ship. Bu Fong climbed up the ship, sitting cross-legged on the deck. Buzz. A moment later, Yu closed her eyes as if she was locating the coordinates of the abyss. Soon, the netherworld ship entered the void, disappearing in a flash. Nether Prison, 9 Revolution, Nether Chef Clan, a furious roar rang out, exploding like a clap of thunder. The entire city was shaking violently. It was the Great Sage's rage. He had been venting his anger for nearly a month, causing the whole city to fall into a state of panic. The 9 Revolution Nether Chef's Clan was divided into 3 major cities, each guarded by 3 divine chefs. This city was called Skyhorn City, and the one guarding it was a great sage of the Demon Goat Clan, called Great Sage of Skyhorn City. This great sage was the one who attacked the Heaven Chief realm and was besieged by the Heaven Tree and the Lord Go, who cut off a goat's leg. Ever since he returned to Skyhorn City, this great sage couldn't restrain his anger, and he kept venting it. Suddenly, Skyhorn City fell silent. After a long time, the palace in Skyhorn City was in an uproar. Several little saint-level existences were summoned into the palace. The Abyssal Chelan Chef Feast. Those guys from Shadow City have sent an invitation to the Heaven Chief Realm. The Heaven Chief Realm will definitely send someone to attend the feast. Go to the Abyss in the next few days and bring back the people from the Heaven Chief Realm. Remember, I want them alive. I want to torture them to death to vent my anger. The Netherworld ship sped through the boundless void at high speed. Bufong sat cross-legged on the deck of the Netherworld ship, closing his eyes to meditate. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the cabin, and before long, a black dog walked out of it with his enchanting cat-like steps. Bufong opened his eyes and looked at the Lord Go with a confused face. "Blackie, why are you here?" The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. "I'm hitching a ride to the Abyss. Wake up your Lord Go when we get there." The Lord Go yawned, glancing at Bufong. Then he went back into the cabin, snoring. Bufong was a little speechless, looking at you. The latter innocently shrugged at Bufong. Apparently, she didn't know why the Lord Go would appear on the Netherworld ship. The Netherworld ship drew a pitch-black arc in the void, flying far away in just a blink of an eye. The Abyss was a huge, magical land not far from the Netherworld and the Heaven Chief Realm. To go to the Abyss, one had to reach a chaotic city near the Abyss. That city was called the Abyss City, and the destination of the Netherworld ship was the Abyss City. After traveling for almost a day, the Netherworld ship gradually flew out of the boundless void. Soon, what entered Bufong's eyes was a huge city floating in the void. That city was majestic and imposing. From a distance, it looked like it was scarlet. Each brick seemed to be stained with fresh blood, emitting a murderous aura. In front of the city, there was a huge square. Although it was called a square, it was just an empty space. Yellow sand was piled on the ground, and it was crowded with people. The Netherworld ship came, stopping on the square. "Bufong, you..." And the Lord Go walked out of the Netherworld ship. The bustling scene made people feel a little dazed. The Lord Go walked with his enchanting cat-like steps, his tail swaying. Sweeping his eyes around, he grinned. "Bufong kid, Lord Go, I have something to do, so I'll leave first. You don't need to wait for me, Lord Go. After you're done, go back early," said the Lord Go. Then he turned around, walking with his enchanting cat-like steps. In just a blink of an eye, he disappeared. Bufong and you blinked, feeling a little puzzled. The square was bustling with people. Some were from the continent, and some were from the Netherworld. People were surging. Bufong and you had been searching for a long time, but they didn't see Realm Lord Dit and the others. Perhaps they had already entered the Abyss City. If they wanted to enter the city, they had to line up. The line at the city gate was already very long. The people who wanted to enter the city had different appearances. Just by looking at the people entering the city, one could see that the Abyss City was a mix of crooks and honest people. Bufong and you lined up for a while. Finally, it was their turn, standing in front of the majestic city gate. A guard gave the two of them a blood-colored jade talisman each. This jade talisman is the symbol of your identity. It's the foundation of your foothold in the Abyss City. With the jade talisman, you have an identity. Once the jade talisman is gone or robbed, you won't be far from death, the guard, a man with a scar on his face, explained to Bufong and you all licking his lips. "You're from the Heaven Chief Realm. Very good. You have guts." The guard looked at Bufong and you with a strange look on his face. Bufong frowned, but he didn't ask anything. The two of them took the jade talisman and entered the city. As soon as they entered the city, a deafening sound rang in their ears. The two of them felt a little dazed. However, they were both strong-willed people. After a while, they pulled themselves together, and their faces became very cold. The identity of the Heaven Chief Realm must be a little special. Bufong was very clear about that. When the Nether Prison experts sent an invitation to Realm Lord Dit, they were sure that Dit would not be able to resist the temptation and come to the Abyss. Perhaps the Abyss had already set up a trap, waiting for Realm Lord Dit to jump into it. But there was nothing they could do about it. The Abyss City looked bright and beautiful on the surface. The air was filled with rich aromas, including the aroma of food and snacks. It was obvious that no matter which city one was in, delicacies were common. As long as there were people, there would be delicious food. Bufong was very curious about the food in the Abyss. After all, this was the place where the abyssal chili sauce was produced. Taking you with him, Bufong walked down the wide street. The streets of the Abyss City were very wide, mainly because the people in the Abyss were very tall. The natives of the Abyss were abyssal demons, who were very rare in the city. When Nether Prison invaded the Abyss, most of the abyssal demons had been slaughtered. Now, most of the so-called abyssal demons in the Abyss only had the blood of abyssal demons flowing in their veins. There should be very few purebred abyssal demons left. Come and see, come and see. The authentic Abyss snack, spicy rice noodles. Abyssal spicy soup dumplings. 1 nether crystal per bowl. It's affordable and delicious. The secret abyssal chili sauce is made from the best authentic abyssal chili. 1 nether crystal per jar. The shouts around him kept ringing into Bufong's mind. This made Bufong a little curious. He took you through the streets of delicious food on both sides of the street. The appearance of these stall owners and hawkers were all very unique. They had black skin and very sharp ears. They looked like elves, but they were more evil than elves. They were people with the blood of abyssal demons. What intrigued Bufong the most was naturally the abyssal chili sauce. Bufong walked up to the stall. It was a very simple stall, stacked with wooden shelves. The stall was filled with pitch black and ugly clay jars. The jars were sealed with clay and looked very simple and crude. Bufong furrowed his brows and looked at the stall owner. It was a middle-aged man with a somewhat wretched appearance. He had dark skin, a scruffy beard, and his small eyes were rolling around. At this moment, he was staring at Nethery and Bufong with shining eyes. Would you like a jar of the secret abyssal chili sauce? It's a specialty of the Abyss, and you can only buy it here. Whether it's a dish or a meal, it's absolutely delicious. The wretched stall owner glanced at Nethery. He was startled by Nethery's peerless beauty. However, the vendor's gaze eventually fell on Bufong because he could feel that Bufong was the one who was curious about the abyssal chili sauce. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back and frowned. The black and ugly clay jars on the wooden shelves were the abyssal chili sauce. It was completely different from the abyssal chili sauce he used to store in crystal jars. Bufong reached out, grabbing a clay jar. With a thought, the clay seal on the jar was removed. A thick, strange smell wafted out. It was indeed the smell of the abyssal chili sauce, but it was even weaker than the original one. Without a doubt, this jar of abyssal chili sauce was of poor quality. Bufong shook his head, covering the jar with clay again. Then, he placed the clay jar on the stall. The stall owner kept staring at Bufong. When he saw Bufong remove the clay seal, his eyes brightened. When Bufong covered the jar with clay again, he was about to leave. The wretched stall owner suddenly reached out his hand. He grabbed Bufong's arm. What? You want to leave? You have to buy it after you open the clay seal. You want to leave after smelling my chili sauce? The stall owner grinned, grabbing Bufong's arm. Chapter 1190. You want to leave after smelling my chili sauce? You have to buy it after smelling it. This is the rule of Abyss City, understand? Newcomer. The vendor looked at Bufong with a playful look in his eyes. As a city vendor, he had sharp eyes. He could tell at a glance that Bufong was a newcomer, a foreigner from the city. Such foreigners were the easiest to bully. He had used this trick to extort a lot of foreigners and earn a lot of nether crystals. His abyssal chili sauce was naturally not good. But what did these foreigners know? As long as he boasted about his abyssal chili sauce, he could rely on these foreigners to earn nether crystals. When a vendor grabbed Bufong's arm, he narrowed his eyes and looked at him doubtfully. You, who had been standing next to Bufong, also frowned and looked coldly at the vendor who grabbed Bufong's arm. You have to buy it after smelling it? Why are you so overbearing? You said coldly, Oh, girl, I'm afraid you don't know the rules of Abyss City. I've seen many foreigners like you. This is your first time in Abyss City, so you'd better hide. You'll die a horrible death if you cause trouble." The vendor grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. "I forgot to tell you. Although I'm just a vendor, I have a brother who works in the law enforcement team of Abyss City. If you, you know what I mean?" Bufong looked expressionlessly at the vendor, who was grinning like a fool. "Let go of me," Bufong said lightly. There was a hint of indisputability in his tone. That startled the vendor, and he quickly let go of Bufong's arm. "Don't even think about running away. You're foreigners. With your identity jade talismans, my brother can easily find you," the vendor said. Bufong glanced at the vendor, but he didn't say anything. Then he grabbed the jar again and opened the lid. "What's the use of buying this thing? The brewing technique is backward, and the fermentation process isn't complete yet. There's also a sour taste," Bufong said. The peddler bared his yellow teeth. "That's none of your business. You smell my chili sauce, so you have to buy it. I'm sorry, but the price of my chili sauce has increased. It can cost 2 nether crystals. Don't even think of leaving without paying." The peddler crossed his arms and sneered. Bullying foreigners was the most interesting thing. Other than this peddler, many other peddlers also slowly surrounded them. They had actually surrounded Bufong and you. "Do you see my brothers and sisters? If you don't buy it, don't even think about leaving this place." Bufong looked at the peddler in confusion. In the next moment, Bufong's divine perception suddenly erupted, and his powerful mental energy spread out, instantly filling the entire area. There was a loud bang. The hearts of everyone present trembled slightly. The surrounding hawkers all sucked in a breath of cold air. 9-star True God Realm. As soon as Bufong revealed his cultivation, the surrounding peddlers were all stunned. No one thought that the young man in front of them had reached the 9-star True Immortal Realm. Could he be a genius from Nether Prison? The peddler was a little regretful at the moment. He didn't expect that he had kicked an iron plate. But soon, his face turned ferocious again. "You think a 9-star True Immortal can be so presumptuous in Abyss City? If you dare to attack, the law enforcement team will take you away immediately. If I were you, I would spend some nether crystals right away to keep the peace. It's better for foreigners to keep a low profile in Abyss City," the peddler said. Bufong frowned. He remembered the strange expressions and smiles of the guards at the gate. Suddenly, he thought of something. Within the range of his divine perception, he sensed one powerful aura after another approaching. The owners of those auras were all 9-star True Immortals, and their leader was even a half-step saint. "It should be the law enforcement team," the peddler mentioned. Bufong frowned. It was indeed not a good idea to clash with the law enforcement team now. His eyes fell on the peddler. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. "I don't have nether crystals, but I'll use something else to replace them," Bufong said. The peddler paused. The next moment, an explosive meatball appeared in Bufong's hand. The meatball bloomed with a brilliant golden light and exuded a rich aroma that soared into the sky and tickled one's taste buds. "This is a meatball I specially made. It's worth 10 nether crystals. I'll exchange it for this jar of chili sauce," Bufong said. You froze. Looking at Bufong, her red lips twitched. Owner Bu was going to stir up trouble. "It smells so good. It's not an ordinary smell." The peddler's eyes narrowed. His eyes were completely attracted by the golden explosive meatball in Bufong's hand, and his whole body trembled. "Do you want to exchange or not?" Bufong said expressionlessly, looking at the peddler. "Yes," the peddler hurriedly said. The smell of the meatball was not ordinary. Coupled with the energy fluctuations, there was no doubt that it was worth 10 nether crystals. At least, it was not a loss to exchange for a meatball. The abyssal chili sauce was made with the lowest quality abyssal chili sauce. The cost was extremely low, and 10 jars might not even be worth 1 nether crystal. Now it could be exchanged for 10 nether crystals. It was a huge profit. Foreigners were really easy to deceive. Take it. This meatball has to be eaten while it's hot," Bufong said. With a wave of his hand, the explosive meatball flew out and fell into the peddler's hand. The peddler happily held it in his hand. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. He turned around and was about to leave with you. "Hey, brother, don't you want your chili sauce?" The peddler hurriedly shouted when he saw Bufong was about to leave. Bufong waved his hand without turning his head. I have no use for trash like you. I wish you good luck. What an idiot, the peddler cursed. The other peddlers around also looked envious. They didn't expect that this yellow tooth would find such a sucker. The meatball looked extraordinary at first glance. Perhaps it was an immortal dish cooked by those nether chefs in nether prison. The peddler's face was full of smiles. Holding the meatball in his hand, he sniffed it happily, an intoxicated look on his face. His sharp ears twitched, showing an intoxicated look. Suddenly, in the distance, one powerful aura after another approached at high speed. One expert after another clad in armor had arrived. The aura of these experts was very terrifying. They were the same experts that Bufong had sensed before. One of the experts glanced at the yellow-toothed peddler in a dignified and indifferent manner. Are you trying to swindle foreigners again? Under the pressure of the expert, the peddler's body trembled. His eyes rolled, and he licked his face with a big smile. Then, he moved closer to the guard. Law enforcer, I got something good this time, and want to give it to you, the peddler said with a sneaky look. The law enforcer furrowed his brows and looked at him coldly. The peddler didn't keep him in suspense. Carefully, he opened his hand and revealed the explosive meatball. He handed it to the law enforcer. I got this from that foreigner. It said that it's worth 10 nether crystals. It's definitely something good. Law enforcer, you can try it while it's hot. I've saved it just for you. The peddler smiled flatteringly. The explosive meatball looked very good. At least, as soon as it appeared, it attracted the law enforcer's attention. Coupled with its rich fragrance, the law enforcer couldn't refuse. He took the meatball. It looks good. You got a good harvest this time, the law enforcer said. I'll give it to you, my lord. As long as you take good care of my business in the future, the peddler said with a sneaky smile. You're considerate. The law enforcer chuckled. He gave the peddler a meaningful look, and the surrounding peddlers immediately looked envious. It was very difficult for mixed-blood abyssal demons like them to live in Abyss City. They lived at the bottom of society, and it was very difficult for them to seize the opportunity. This time, the peddler had seized the opportunity. As long as he clung to the law enforcer's thigh, he would have no problem eating and drinking well in this area. The law enforcer ignored him and grabbed the explosive meatball. The meatball exuded a layer of mist. The law enforcer grinned, then grabbed the meatball and took a deep breath. The fragrance on it seemed to have turned into little snakes, drilling into his nose. Smells good. The law enforcer sighed in admiration. Then he grabbed the meatball and stuffed it into his mouth. As soon as it entered his mouth, a rich fragrance gushed out, making him shiver. In the distance, Bufong and Nethery looked strangely at the law enforcer, who was stuffing the meatball into his mouth. The corner of Yu's mouth twitched. She knew very well the terrible power of the explosive meatball. It was a terrible meatball that could blow up a 9-star true immortal realm expert. Well, I've weakened the meatball a little. I just want to teach that peddler a lesson, Bufong said honestly. Now boom! Bufong hadn't finished speaking. In the distance, a terrible explosion broke out. Bufong gave you a helpless look, then shrugged. I didn't intend for this to happen. A rumble echoed out. A terrible wave of air surged out. The law enforcers, who were standing in a group, couldn't react at all before they were pushed away by the shockwave. The surrounding peddlers let out terrified cries of alarm. What happened? Why did it suddenly explode? And the place where the explosion happened seemed to be where the law enforcer was sitting. Miserable howls rang out. The law enforcer, who had eaten the explosive meatball, had his entire face swollen. All his teeth had fallen out, and his eyes were bloodshot. That meatball was a F***king hidden weapon. This yellow tooth wanted to kill him. You. The law enforcer stared at the peddler with the yellow tooth. The latter had long been scared out of his wits. He stood blankly, a dumbfounded look on his face. He still didn't understand what had happened. The meatball can explode. The peddler sucked in a cold breath. Then, he came to his senses and understood what had happened. After understanding it, his heart trembled and his anger rose. That foreigner had tricked him with a low-quality meatball, and he had even told him to eat it while it was hot. Nowadays, foreigners were really vicious and scary. Your Excellency. The peddler's expression changed dramatically, and he hurriedly turned to look at the law enforcer. When he saw the law enforcer's miserable state, his face turned deathly pale. At this moment, the other law enforcers also came to their senses. When they saw the law enforcer with a pig's head, they couldn't help but show strange expressions. Some of them couldn't help but laugh out loud. The law enforcer, who had suffered, was so furious that his murderous aura skyrocketed. A clang rang out. Instantly, a sharp sword light flashed. Your Excellency, it's not my fault. It's those two foreigners. They are over there. The yellow-toothed peddler felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He pointed at Bufong and you in the distance and shouted in a hoarse voice. However, before he could finish speaking, his voice came to an abrupt stop. The law enforcer's sword slashed down. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and the peddler was beheaded. The law enforcer's black sword flashed and sucked the peddler's soul into it. The peddler died in an instant. The surrounding peddlers felt their bodies go cold. This was the power of a law enforcer. In Abyss City, the law enforcers under the command of the Lord of Abyss City were the most terrible killing weapons. No one dared to offend them. The pig-headed law enforcer's eyes were still spitting fire. He looked in the direction the peddler was pointing and saw Bufong and you. Without a doubt, the foreigner was the one who gave the peddler the exploding meatball. The culprits of all this were these two foreigners. How dare they cause trouble in Abyss City? They must die. With a clanging sound, the law enforcer, whose head was blown up like a pig's head, teleported toward Bufong, leaving behind afterimages as he slashed out with his sword. You turned to look at Bufong, her face cold. You made a big scene this time. Bufong's face was expressionless. He wasn't afraid. It's okay. I just made some noise and let Realm Master Dit know that we're here. We need to meet up, Bufong said. Boom. How dare you provoke a law enforcer? You're courting death. The law enforcer was furious. He slashed out with his sword, which was black and full of strange energy fluctuations. Bufong's face was calm. He watched as the sword enlarged in his eyes. Bufong's mind flickered. Immediately, explosive meatballs floated in the air around his body. He picked one up with 2 fingers and took a bite. A sizzling sound rang out from the meatball. Bufong flicked his fingers, and the explosive meatball shot out, speeding toward the law enforcer. Have a good taste of the real explosive meatball. Chapter 1191. Looking at the law enforcer, who was holding a pitch-black longsword, shooting toward him, Bufong flicked his finger and threw out an explosive meatball that he had taken a bite of. A ripping sound rang out as it streaked across the sky like a shooting star. The law enforcer's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was this meatball that had almost blown his head off. How dare this foreigner attack me with this kind of hidden weapon? He's courting death. He swung his sword. Thousands of sword shadows filled the air, and a terrible sword energy swept toward Bufong with a fluctuation that made one's soul tremble. The black sword was absolutely extraordinary. It gave off a unique aura, and one could feel the roar of 10,000 souls from it. The explosive meatball shot out and collided with the law enforcer's sword. Without any suspense, there was an explosion. The terrible explosion threw the law enforcer, whose head had been blown into a pig's head, flying backward. The fluctuation of the explosion made the law enforcer tremble as if he was about to cough up blood. His hand, which was holding the sword, was trembling incessantly as fresh blood dripped from it. A huge hole had been blasted open on his chest, from which blood continuously spurted out. Damn foreigner, how dare you fight back in Abyss City and attack a law enforcer? You're dead. You'll be tortured to death. The pig-faced law enforcer raised his head. Although blood was flowing from his chest and the web between his thumb and forefinger was torn, his eyes were filled with violent emotions. Oh! Bufong put his hands behind his back, and one brilliant golden explosive meatball after another hovered around him. He looked at the law enforcer with a cold face. Do I have to stand where I am and let him kill me with a sword? Do I look like a fool to Bufong? The surrounding peddlers were stunned. Not only them, but many pedestrians also stopped to watch. They looked at Bufong as if he was a dead man. In Abyss City, the city lord was the most powerful family. His subordinates, the sharp sword law enforcers, were in charge of the order in the city. No one dared to provoke them. Even the nether prison experts in Abyss City did not dare to provoke them. Every single person who provoked the law enforcers was now a rotten corpse. This young man, who looked like an outsider, actually dared to retaliate and even injure a law enforcer. There's going to be a good show to watch. The peddlers, who were originally terrified, were now filled with excitement. These foreigners would soon die a miserable death under the law enforcer's torture. The pig-headed law enforcer knelt on one knee with a cold smile on his face. The sound of something tearing through the air resounded. The other law enforcers who had come with the pig-faced law enforcer also shot forward at the same time. Each of them drew a pitch-black longsword that seemed capable of intimidating one's soul. The tip of the sword was pointed at Bufong. You stood behind Bufong, her eyes dark. Seeing so many people making a move, Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. Buzz, the pitch-black nether energy on his body, immediately spread out. In the next moment, green veins suddenly appeared at the corners of his eyes and spread to his ears. At the same time, Yu's aura burst forth, and it seemed to be no weaker than that of a 9-star true immortal. Bufong looked at Yu in surprise, as if wondering how fast Yu's cultivation base was improving. However, Bufong still reached out a hand and patted Yu on the head. You don't have to do anything. Just stay here. Bufong dared not let you do anything. The curse in Yu was like a sharp sword hanging over her head. Once she made a move, the curse might break out. At that time, Bufong would have a headache. After being patted by Bufong, Yu blinked, and the green veins at the corners of his eyes gradually disappeared. She looked quietly at Bufong and stood aside, pretending to be a beautiful woman. Bufong turned his head and looked at the law enforcers who were shooting toward him. Those law enforcers had cold faces, and their cultivation bases were extremely strong. Each of them had reached 9-star true immortal realm. It seemed that the minimum cultivation base to become a law enforcer was 9-star true immortal realm. Bufong had sensed the power of a half-step saint, but that half-step saint hadn't come here. With Bufong's current cultivation base and his habit of fighting across realms every day, a few 9-star true immortal realm experts weren't worthy of his attention. He reached out a hand and patted Little Hu, who was on his back. Little Hu, who had been lying lazily on Bufong's shoulder, stood up proudly, and his fox tail seemed like it was about to explode. In a flash, he jumped into Bufong's arms. Provoke a law enforcer. Kill him without mercy. A loud shout rang out. In the next moment, numerous terrifying sword lights attacked from all directions. They blocked all of Bufong's escape routes. They wanted to kill him with one strike. The pig-headed law enforcer knelt in the distance, looking extremely excited. Although he was coughing blood, he couldn't hide his excitement. Die! Boom! With an expressionless face, Bufong looked at the sword energy shooting toward him. A moment later, he rubbed Little Hu's head. The latter's eyes lit up. He opened his mouth and burped. Then, a dazzling light gathered in Little Hu's mouth. Little Hu, shoot horizontally, Bufong said. Little Hu nodded. A moment later, boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions rang out. One after another, golden cannonballs shot out at lightning speed. They shot towards the streaks of sword chi. Boom, boom. The few 9-star, true, immortal realm experts were stunned. What kind of attack was that? However, before they could recover their wits, they found that the dazzling golden shells had smashed their sword energy and completely shattered it. The shells didn't lose their momentum and continued toward them. They raised their long swords in front of their chests to block. When the shells hit the swords, they seemed to have the force of 10,000 caddies. The swords made noises as if they couldn't bear the burden. One of the law enforcers vomited blood, and the black sword in his hand was bent. However, the second cannonball sped towards them. The numerous shells scared the law enforcer so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. An explosion rang out. The law enforcers who were dashing toward them were all devoured by the flames. A small mushroom cloud soared into the sky, clang. A crisp sound rang out. Amid the sweeping flames, a black sword that had been broken into two and was still emitting green smoke was slashed out. It was the law enforcer's weapon. This weapon had actually been blasted into pieces. The pig-headed law enforcer was stunned. His eyes were blank as he stared blankly at the group of law enforcers who were devoured by the flames. All of a sudden, he felt a chill run down his spine. Was this outsider going to overturn the sky? Swoosh, amidst the flames, one figure after another flew out and fell to the ground. Their bodies were scorched black, and their auras were weak. It looked like they were about to die. A group of law enforcers was almost wiped out. The surrounding people were dumbfounded. The result was completely beyond their expectations. The peddlers were even more horrified. They had actually threatened such a ruthless man. They had threatened a ruthless man who even dared to kill a law enforcer. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Were all foreigners so domineering nowadays? Were they not afraid of death? Little Who shut his mouth, feeling a little unsatisfied. She had just started the first round of fire, and this group of people couldn't hold on anymore. It was boring. Bu Fong stroked Little Who's head, his face indifferent. With such an iconic mushroom cloud rising, Realm Lord Dit and the others should know that it was him, right? Abyss City. On the long street, Realm Lord Dit was happily eating snacks. City Lord Meng Chi followed behind him. The two of them were enjoying the local customs of Abyss City. Suddenly, a violent explosion rang out in the distance. Realm Lord Dit grabbed a meatball, stained with chili, and stuffed it into his mouth. The delicacies of the Abyss were inseparable from chili. Every dish was cooked with chili. Which fool is making trouble in Abyss City? Abyss City has changed its city lord, and he's so awesome. Even those nether prison fellows don't dare to make trouble. Realm Lord Dit turned to Meng Chi and bit the meatball. Meng Chi smiled gracefully. Boom! Another explosion rang out, and this time, it was accompanied by a familiar mushroom cloud. Realm Lord Dit and Meng Chi were both stunned. Looking at the familiar mushroom cloud, their eyes went wide. The two of them looked at each other. Realm Lord Dit swallowed the meatball. The spicy taste flowed down his throat, making his eyes spit fire. Wow, water! Realm Lord Dit covered his throat and jumped up and down. Meng Chi rubbed her forehead, speechless. The next moment, Meng Chi floated out. Your Highness, this familiar mushroom cloud. Could it be that Bu Fong has appeared in Abyss City? Impossible. Bu Fong said he wouldn't come. Realm Lord Dit gulped down a mouthful of water and felt refreshed. Then, he returned to Meng Chi. Meng Chi frowned. But who else could make that mushroom cloud except Bu Fong? Forget it. Let's go and have a look. Look, even the half-step saint of Abyss City is here. Realm Lord Dit said, wiping his mouth. Then, the two of them sped toward the source of the commotion. Bu Fong stood where he was, his vermilion robe flapping noisily in the wind. Little Who lay back on his shoulder and yawned, looking a little sleepy. A terrifying clamor resounded. The next moment, the sound of something piercing through the air rang out. Dozens of law enforcers flew through the air and landed in the surroundings, surrounding them tightly. With his hands clasped behind his back, a half-step saint walked over step by step, looking down at Bu Fong. Who in Abyss City gave you the courage to attack a law enforcer? The half-step saint said coldly, his voice full of cold, killing intent. Bu Fong raised his head and looked at him, his face expressionless. Am I supposed to stand here and let the law enforcers cut me to death? Can't I fight back? Bu Fong thought the people of Abyss City were overbearing. Then stand here and let the law enforcers cut you to death. You're just an outsider. How dare you cause trouble in Abyss City? Are you tired of living? The half-step saint said coldly. Then, he shot out like a cannonball. His palm pressed down on Bu Fong. He wanted to make Bu Fong kneel on the ground. However, the moment the half-step saint made his move, a figure suddenly dashed out from the crowd. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of Bufong. His long robe fluttered in the wind, and his body was faintly discernible. His hair was golden. Realm Lord Dit waved his hand. The half-saint enforcer was sent flying and landed in the distance. His face grew serious and colder. Little saint? When the half-step saint said the word little saint, he didn't show the slightest fear. A blood-colored jade talisman appeared in his hand, and he was about to crush it. However, his movements quickly turned sluggish. That was because the little saint in the distance had taken out a black invitation with a cheeky smile on his face. As he looked at the invitation, the half-step saint's expression became strange. Law Enforcer. This little friend is our lost companion. It took me a lot of effort to find him. I'm sorry for bringing you trouble. Realm Lord Dit fiddled with the black invitation and looked at the Law Enforcer with a smile. The Law Enforcer got up from the ground. He coldly glanced at Bufong, then at Dit. You're from the Heaven Chief Realm? The half-step saint asked. Realm Lord Dit nodded. We were invited by the Abyss City Lord to attend the Abyssal Qilin Chef feast this time, said Realm Lord Dit. Since you're here to attend the Qilin Chef feast, hurry up and leave. Otherwise, I'll kill that kid. He injured so many of my law enforcers. If it weren't for the invitation, I would have killed him. The half-step saint said coldly. Bufong's face was expressionless when he heard that. This guy is really arrogant. He patted the little Hu Li's head. The latter jumped into Bufong's arms and opened his mouth wide. Realm Lord didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Bufong was really bad-tempered. Realm Lord Dit quickly covered the little Hu Li's mouth, then pulled Bufong away. Bufong twitched the corner of his mouth. Behind them, the half-step Saint Law Enforcer looked at Bufong and the others with a faint smile on his face as they left. You're here to attend the Qilin Chef feast. Oomph. The half-step saint sneered. Captain, why didn't you kill that guy? He bullied us law enforcers, so we should kill him, said the law enforcer, whose head was blown up by Bufong. The half-step saint gave him a sideways glance, his face still full of sneers. What's the hurry? None of the people from the Heaven Chief Realm who will attend the Qilin Chef feast can escape. There are many people who want to kill them. In the crowd, a figure wrapped in a black robe watched Realm Lord Dit and the others leave with Bufong. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. We finally found the people from the Heaven Chief Realm. Chapter 1192. Why are you running? Realm Lord Dit pulled Bufong toward the crowd. Little Hu had already climbed onto Bufong's shoulder, rolling his eyes curiously. You, on the other hand, followed behind Bufong. She exchanged a glance with Mengqi, but didn't say a word. The reason we came to Abyss City is for the Qilin Chef feast. Do you know who's hosting it? Realm Lord Dit gave Bufong a dirty look. He didn't expect Bufong to fight with the law enforcement team as soon as he arrived in Abyss City. None of the law enforcement team in Abyss City was easy to deal with. All of them had gone through countless bloody battles and grown up bathed in blood. If Bufong fought with them, he wouldn't have a good ending. Perhaps the 4 judges of the law enforcement team would be alerted. If that happened, it would be very difficult to deal with them. Not to mention the new city lord of Abyss City, who was in existence that even the Nether Prison was afraid of. I don't know, Bufong said honestly. He really didn't know. However, he was very unhappy with the attitude of those law enforcers. Those law enforcers always acted as if they were the most powerful people in the world, and those who offended them should stand where they were and let them kill them with their swords. That made Bufong very unhappy. The host of the Qilin Chef feast is the city lord of Abyss City. It is said that he used to be the great judge of the law enforcement team, but he killed the previous city lord and replaced him, Realm Lord Dit said in a serious tone. Unlike the immortal cooking realm, Abyss City was a city of chaos, a place of slaughter, and countless exiled experts gathered here. Outside the Abyss City, killings were taking place almost every second. However, in Abyss City, after the new city lord took over, no one dared to kill. This showed how terrifying the authority of the new city lord was. Bufong twitched his mouth and said nothing. When will the Qilin chef feast start? Why haven't you set off yet? Bufong asked. The Qilin chef feast was held in the real abyss, where the abyssal demons lived. I was just about to go, and I just happened to see you making such a big commotion. Luckily, we didn't move, otherwise. You might have been beaten to death by these law enforcers. Realm Mastered It said. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. If it doesn't work, I'll use a perishing pot. If one doesn't work, I'll use two perishing pot. Realm Lord didn't say anything. That was Bufong's ultimate weapon. With a single strike, a third of Abyss City would be gone. With Bufong's current cultivation base, no ordinary little saint could resist the perishing pot. One must know that in that great battle. With a perishing pot, Bufong killed a one-revolution little saint troll. Since we're in a foreign land, let's keep a low profile and not cause any trouble. Let's go to the Abyss now. We need to buy an Abyssal Quetzalcoatlus first. Realm Mastered It said. The four of them had no objection, and they followed Realm Mastered It to the trading market. The trading market of Abyss City was very large. They found the area where the Abyssal Quetzalcoatlus was traded. They spent 1,000 nether crystals to exchange for an Abyssal Quetzalcoatlus. The Abyssal Quetzalcoatlus was a branch of the dragon race. It was different from the divine dragons, but the truly powerful ones were also existences close to the divine dragons. Realm Master Dit bought an Abyssal Quetzalcoatlus. It was 30 meters tall and had a huge body. When it spread its huge wings, they almost blotted out the sky. The Quetzalcoatlus had 2 pairs of wings, and when they flapped, they stirred up a strong wind that almost turned into a whistling hurricane. On the back of the Quetzalcoatlus was a simple hut built by merchants, with soft chairs on it. It was a place for people to rest on the back of the Quetzalcoatlus. In fact, the Quetzalcoatlus they bought would automatically fly back to the trading market after they left Abyss City. Therefore, the merchants who traded with the Quetzalcoatlus were basically making a lot of money. The Abyss was very far from Abyss City. They needed to fly through a chaotic area, which was full of void turbulence. Their sense of direction was very chaotic. Only the Abyssal Quetzalcoatlus could find the way to the Abyss. Otherwise, it was easy to get lost in the endless void turbulence. Bufong and the others jumped onto the back of the Quetzalcoatlus. The Quetzalcoatlus opened its mouth and let out a dragon roar, which shook the sky. The merchant who sold the Quetzalcoatlus opened his mouth and let out a long roar. His roar soared into the sky. These merchants were also mixed-race abyssal demons. They had sharp ears and dark skin. As the roar faded, the Quetzalcoatlus flapped its wings, and with a rumble, it leaped up from the ground. Its 2 pairs of wings flapped, stirring up a strong wind as it soared into the sky and steadily flew into the distance. Bufong and the others sat on the Quetzalcoatlus's back. The strong wind blew against their faces, but it was blocked by the array on the hut, and the wind parted. It was comfortable. Bufong sat on a chair and looked down. Immediately, he saw the entire Abyss City. In their eyes, the Abyss City was getting smaller and smaller, but it was getting more and more terrifying. It was like a ferocious demon, opening its mouth as if it wanted to swallow people. As Bufong looked at the Abyss City, his eyes became more and more stagnant. He had a feeling that this city would have an indescribable relationship with him in the future. This feeling wasn't good. Abyss City, inside a crimson-red house. The door was pushed open. A figure wrapped in a black robe slowly stepped into the building and walked around the complicated buildings. Soon, he arrived at the main hall. The atmosphere in the lobby was very heavy. A powerful pressure filled the air, making the black-robed man bow and kneel on the ground. Lord Judge, I'm really sorry. My insensible subordinates have disturbed you. Sitting in the main seat, a black-robed man wearing a goat mask chuckled. Next to him, a man wrapped in a blood-colored robe smiled faintly. It doesn't matter. Your subordinates must have received some news. The man wearing the goat mask immediately looked at the man kneeling on the ground. Speak. The man's body trembled. Then he hurriedly said, My lord, the people from the Heaven Chief realm, have been found. Oh, have you found them? The eyes of the expert wearing the goat mask narrowed, and a bright light seemed to shoot out of them. They are now riding the abyssal winged dragon to the abyss, preparing to participate in the Chelan Chef feast. Said the man, "Going to the abyss. Very good. It's a pity that the great sage wants to capture them alive. Otherwise, the chaotic land would be a good place to bury their bones." The man wearing the goat mask stood up and sneered. The judge stood up, narrowed his eyes, and looked at the man wearing the goat mask. "In that case, I won't disturb Brother Yongzheng. Come to my mansion another day, and I'll treat you with the best abyssal demon wine." "Haha, I'll certainly go there." Abyssal demon wine is one of the 3 great specialties of the abyss. Authentic abyssal demon wine is hard to find, and I look forward to it. "Thank you in advance, my Lord Judge." Yongzheng laughed and cupped his fist. Then, with a chuckle, the judge disappeared from the great hall as if he had teleported. "My lord," that judge, the man kneeling on the ground, took a deep breath and asked, "It's none of your business." "It's none of your business. In today's abyss, no one is easy to deal with. But let's not trouble them. For the sake of the great saint, they won't trouble us. What we need to do now is to capture those trash from the immortal cooking realm alive and let the great saint vent his anger." Yongzheng said lightly. He stepped down from his seat and took a deep breath. "I'm afraid we have to hurry. The 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan and the Shadow Demon clan are eyeing the people from the Heaven Chief realm," Yongzheng said with his hands clasped behind his back. "Are the people from the Heaven Chief realm so magical? How could they attract 3 of the 9 Nether Prison clans to attack them?" The man was puzzled. "Ah, do you really think the great sage asked us to capture them just to vent his anger?" "Young people, the great sage's purpose is still to obtain the secret of the Heaven Chief realm. Have you ever seen a dried pot that can blow up a little saint? That kind of power is very terrifying. If the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan obtains it, the ranking of the 9 Nether Prison clans will change," Yongzheng said. After that, he didn't explain further. He just ordered his men to go to the abyss and intercept the winged dragons of Bufong and the others. In the courtyard, dragon roars rang out one after another. Strong tiger-winged dragons sped out of the courtyard. They were not as huge as the abyssal winged dragons, but they were more agile and ferocious. After flying out, they seemed to turn into a bolt of black lightning and sped toward the abyss. At the same time, tiger-winged dragons spread their wings and flew out of many courtyards in Abyss City. Accompanied by a dragon roar, they flew toward the abyss that seemed to be shrouded in chaos. In the ferocious palaces of Abyss City, these palaces were flying in a peculiar manner. They weren't dazzling in gold and jade, but rather terrifying in appearance. The roofs were like sharp, long blades that shot into the sky. They looked like they were going to pierce the sky. They were blood red, as if they were bleeding. In a side hall of the Abyss Palace, 3 experts clad in blood-colored robes sat cross-legged in the hall. Suddenly, a figure flew past the door and landed in the middle of the side hall, leaving a trail of afterimages behind. The 3 judges opened their eyes at the same time. It's time to move. The people of Nether Prison have set off. This Chelan Chef feast is going to be interesting. The returning judge had returned from Yongzheng's place. As his voice rang out, a burst of cold laughter rang out in the side hall. The great judge and the city lord's plan is really bold. If they succeed this time, the abyss will be able to become independent of Nether Prison and no longer be restrained by it. The judge's voice rang out, and then he burst out laughing. The next moment, they all turned into beams of blood-colored light and rushed out of the side hall. Swoosh! The turbulence in the void was very violent. Above, it was a boundless starry sky. The stars in the starry sky were moving slowly, while the turbulence was like an invisible membrane that separated the starry sky from the land. The huge abyssal winged dragons were not very fast, and they were a little clumsy. Their intelligence had been destroyed by those merchants, and all they had left was simple obedience. That was why they looked a little silly. Swoosh! The void turbulence lashed at the void, causing cracks to appear in the void. Sitting cross-legged on the winged dragon's back, Bufang raised his head and looked at the boundless starry sky. The starry sky was beautiful, and people could not help but be fascinated by it. You, Dit, Realm Lord Li Mu, and Meng Qi all raised their heads and looked at the starry sky. This was the first time they had seen such a beautiful starry sky. The stars were so bright that they looked like gems inlaid in the darkness, blooming with extreme beauty. Stars fell like shooting stars. Rivers of stars flowed slowly, looking very alluring. Bufang was silent, looking at the starry sky. At this moment, all kinds of feelings welled up in his heart. So, this world also had a starry sky. Then, in the endless starry sky, was there also a blue planet? Bufang did not know. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Maybe this starry sky was not the one in his memory. Exhaling, Bufang had mixed feelings. The starry sky is so beautiful. Yu's eyes were a little blurred as she sighed. Bufang looked at Yu. The latter seemed to be intoxicated by the beauty of the starry sky. Legend has it that only by becoming the great sage can one have the strength to walk in the starry sky for a short time. Think about it, stepping on the endless starry sky, overlooking everything. How ethereal is that feeling? Realm Lord Dit said, intoxicated. Bufang glanced at him. You still have a long way to go. Stop daydreaming. Realm Lord Dit looked at Bufang with some hidden bitterness. Yu and Meng Qi covered their mouths and laughed. The atmosphere became a little relaxed. Suddenly, Bufang furrowed his brows. Realm Lord Dit's eyes also focused, becoming a little sharp as he looked into the distance. Their dragon roars resounded one after another. In the blink of an eye, they suddenly surrounded the winged dragons of Bufang and the others. Roar. It sounded like a dragon's roar and a tiger's roar. The terrifying sound waves made the abyssal winged dragon a little frightened and uneasy, its body shaking violently. Puff, puff, puff. Sounds of explosions rang out. In the next moment, numerous long hooks shot out. The long hooks were very sharp, directly hooking the two pairs of wings of the winged dragon. Swish. The abyssal winged dragon instantly let out a painful roar. Rumble, rumble. Then, on the backs of those tiger-winged dragons, streams of powerful nether energy burst out, directly approaching Bufang and the others. Realm Lord Dit's face was a little unsightly. The people of Nether Prison have indeed prepared an ambush. What should we do? Meng Qi said anxiously. Yu furrowed her brows. Bufang's face was expressionless. He raised his hand and rubbed Little Hu's head. Then he exhaled. What else can we do? Beat them. Chapter 1193. What else? Just beat them up. Bufang said, stroking Little Hu's head. Realm Lord Dit and the others looked at Bufang, speechless. What was wrong with Onerbu recently? Why was he so irritable and fighting at the slightest disagreement? You clenched your fists and said seriously, that's right. Beat them up. Realm Lord Dit fell silent. In fact, he knew very well that this Qilin chef feast was a trap that Nether Prison had dug for him. As long as he set off for the feast, Nether Prison experts would definitely make a move. In the past, Meng Qi and the Zhou Lords also had this fear. However, the temptation of the Qilin chef feast was too great, and the divine chef's remains was even more difficult for him to refuse. It seemed that the Nether Prison experts had confirmed Realm Lord Dit's thoughts, so they had dug a trap for him to jump into. It was a very frustrating feeling. Damn it. Beat them up. Realm Lord Dit slammed the table and rose to his feet, his brows raised. The feeling of being led by the nose made him extremely angry. Roar. A miserable dragon roar rang through the air. There was a tearing noise. The abyssal winged dragon's wings were torn apart. Blood sprayed in an instant, filling the sky. A huge hole was torn open on its wings. The abyssal winged dragon's body swayed violently. Trash from the immortal cooking realm. Just surrender. You can't run away in this void turbulence zone. Bufang said coldly. A voice full of energy resounded. A figure wrapped in a black robe stood on the back of a tiger winged dragon. The figure's aura towered into the sky, extremely oppressive and shaking the sky. There was no doubt that he was a little saint. His aura was even stronger than that of the giant demon. Countless tiger-winged dragons flew across the sky, opening their mouths and staring greedily at the abyssal winged dragon. Their sharp teeth glinted coldly, making people shudder. Kill them. The nether prison experts on the back of the tiger-winged dragon also roared. The auras of these nether prison experts were not weak. Most of them were 9-star true immortals, and there were even 3 half-step saints among them. Using this lineup to deal with Bufang's group of 4 was a big move. Basically, it was an inescapable net that wanted to capture Bufang and the others in one fell swoop. Surrender? I'll kill you all. Realm Lord Dit opened his eyes wide and let out a furious roar. These nether prison experts were from the 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan, so he was very familiar with their auras. Realm Lord Dit had always been angry with the 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan because they were the traitors of the Heaven Chief realm. Without Heaven Chief realm, there would be no 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan. But now, the 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan wanted to destroy Heaven Chief realm. These ungrateful ingrates. Stubborn resistance. The little saint who was standing on the back of the tiger-winged dragon sneered. The next moment, he let out a long roar. The tiger-winged dragons roared, their dragon roars echoing through the air. The hooks shot out again and landed on the abyssal winged dragon's back. It landed on the back of the abyssal winged dragon, and with a tearing sound, blood splattered everywhere. The huge winged dragon struggled violently in pain. Blood gushed out like a pillar and rained down continuously, filling the void. Standing on the abyssal winged dragon's back, Bufang and the others felt a wave of shaking and losing their balance. Everyone's eyes focused. Realm Lord Dit took a deep breath. Immortal energy swirled around his body and shot out. In the next moment, a golden armor appeared and wrapped around his body. World King armor. Boom! Realm Lord Dit, standing on the abyssal winged dragon's back, leaped off the dragon's back. He flew off the back of the winged dragon and landed on the back of a tiger-winged dragon. A 9-star, true, immortal realm nether prison expert stood on it. Die! The 9-star, true, immortal roared, slashing his sword at Realm Lord Dit. Realm Lord Dit's eyes were cold. He raised his hand and crushed the sword, then smashed his palm on the nether prison expert's head, causing it to explode. Realm Lord Dit seemed to have gone mad. He leaped up, landed on the back of another tiger-winged dragon, and began to kill crazily. With a single punch, a 9-star true immortal realm expert exploded once again. The 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan expert never thought that Realm Lord Dit would dare to fight back. Under such circumstances, he still dared to fight back. Fighting back in a desperate situation? You're courting death. The little saint roared. He stepped into the void, stepping on the turbulent space current as he charged toward Realm Lord Dit. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he approached, punching and kicking. His killing intent swept out. Realm Lord Dit felt a terrible pressure, and his eyes narrowed. Then he turned around. His golden armor bloomed with golden light, and a dazzling kitchen knife fell into his hand. He swung it out as if to cut the void. Knife light filled the air. A long spear thrust out, colliding with the kitchen knife. The sound of collision rang out incessantly. Boom! The two little saints fought in the void. One tiger-winged dragon after another flew away. The other nether prison experts fixed their eyes on Bufang and his companions. A half-step saint holding a big machete soared into the sky. Nether energy swirled around him, gathering on the kitchen knife. Boom! The knife slashed down, flashing as if to tear the void apart. The pitch-black kitchen knife blotted out the sky, slashing toward Bufang and the others on the abyssal winged dragon's back. It was too fast. Bufang and the others wanted to resist, but they couldn't protect the abyssal winged dragon. Swish! The knife slashed on the abyssal winged dragon's head. The abyssal winged dragon was cut in half, and blood spilled in the sky. Bufong and the others soared into the sky. Nethery's face was grave, and blue veins bulged in her eyes, spreading to her ears. Mengqi's immortal robe fluttered as she prepared to resist. The 30-feet-long abyssal winged dragon was cut in half, and blood spilled in the sky. It was forcibly cut into two halves. Mengqi sucked in a cold breath. Blood gushed out. One by one, the tiger-winged dragon flew out, opened their sharp teeth, bit the abyssal winged dragon's body, and began to tear it apart. The scene was very bloody. Bufong's face was cold. The merchant who sold the abyssal winged dragon is going to suffer a huge loss. Bufong said. Mengqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was this the focus of attention now? You also nodded solemnly. A huge loss. Bufong grinned. His eyes scanned the area. Anyway, the nether prison is going to suffer a huge loss. Bufong said. His mind flickered. White specks of light filled the air, and soon a formation appeared in the void. Buzz in the void. A terrifying fluctuation spread out from the white array. Then, lightning arcs shot out, and a huge figure emerged from it. Boom! Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. A tiger-winged dragon opened its mouth, pouncing on Bufong. Its mouth was full of blood, and its eyes were extremely ferocious. Xiaobai, this time, I'll only kill. No stripping. Bufong said. A moment later, the entire void seemed to have lit up. Then, a thick bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. The war god stick was like a long spear wrapped in lightning, shooting at high speed, directly piercing the tiger-winged dragon's head. With a boom, it exploded. The metal wings on Xiaobai's back clanged as they spread open. His entire body looked ferocious, and his mechanical eyes turned scarlet. With a ripping sound, it crossed the sky. The tiger-winged dragon exploded. The war god's stick flew backward, falling into Bufong's hand. Xiaobai grabbed the war god's stick, his body exploding. The 9-star true immortal realm expert on the tiger-winged dragon's back was smashed by Xiaobai's stick. Xiaobai had swallowed countless lightning punishments, and his fighting power had reached a terrifying level. He was not weaker than a half-step saint. Xiaobai has become stronger. Yu's eyes brightened. Then, her delicate body shot out like a spring. Her voluptuous body bloomed with extreme temptation. Her eyes locked on a tiger-winged dragon that was pouncing on her. She raised her palm, and terrifying nether energy filled the air. Then, there was a loud bang. An invisible fluctuation exploded. Instantly, that tiger-winged dragon exploded, blown away by an invisible force. That 9-star true immortal realm expert instantly shot out. With a roar, he continued to attack you. A blade light flashed. That 9-star true immortal realm expert was cut in half. Mengqi smiled sweetly at you. Bufong rubbed Little Hu's head. Looking at the densely packed tiger-winged dragons pouncing towards him, he immediately took a deep breath. Suddenly, he was looking forward to it. Something big was about to happen. Then Little Hu got into Bufong's hand. After rubbing her head, Little Hu opened her mouth. Countless beams of energy gathered. A moment later, beams of energy shot out. They shot toward the tiger-winged dragons in the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions reverberated in the void. Little Hu's eyes brightened. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Boom, 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 boom. Accurately, they hit each tiger-winged dragon. The tiger-winged dragon that was struck by it would explode and be engulfed in flames. Flames filled the sky. Mushroom clouds exploded one after another, and the turbulence in the void became more terrifying. As Bufong hovered in the void, Little Hu's head kept moving, shooting energy. Explosions rang out. The explosion spread for 300 miles. Flames soared to the sky. In the distance, the little saint, who was fighting with Realm Lord Dit, was shocked. What the F***CK was going on? That little chef was just a 9-star true immortal realm expert. How could he have such a killing technique? No wonder His Excellency Divine Chef asked him to send so many experts here. If he didn't send enough people, they would all be wiped out. That fox was a great killing weapon. Boom! Boom! Explosions rang out. The tiger-winged dragons exploded. One by one, the nether chefs soared into the sky. However, before they could stabilize their bodies, they saw a beam of lightning shooting toward them. A long iron rod that looked like a spear suddenly shot out. It pierced the heads of the experts, causing their bodies to explode. Corpses continued to fall from the void. The scene was extremely terrifying. In the distant void, many passing caravans sucked in their breaths and changed their routes, watching from afar, not daring to get close. This place was no longer under the jurisdiction of Abyss City. It was a killing zone. This kind of scene was common. However, it was rare to see such a large-scale massacre. They watched the corpses of the experts fall into the void like rain. Many people felt a chill run down their backs. Of course, some people stopped to watch. These people were also riding tiger-winged dragons and watching from a distance. Yang Zheng's eyes were grave as he took a deep breath. Now you know why the great sage wants us to capture them alive. If the Nether Chef clan gets hold of such a great killing weapon, it will be a disaster that can change the fate of Nether Prison. Yang Zheng said. His subordinates felt a chill run down their backs. The scene was indeed terrible, especially the young man in a striped red and white chef robe, holding a little Hu. He was simply a great killing weapon. The meatball that the little Hu spat out was a nightmarish weapon of destruction. Let's not make a move first and reap the benefits. The experts of Shadow City are still watching in the distance, Yang Zheng said. He looked up. Lifting his gaze, he seemed to see through thousands of miles and saw a huge warship floating in the void in the distance. Inside the warship, many Nether Prison experts were watching the battle. No, it was a massacre. The little saint of the Nether Chef clan was mad with rage. Are you stupid? Kill that boy for me. The little saint roared. He turned to the two half-step saints in the distance and roared. The two half-step saints came to their senses and hurriedly attacked. Their black knives drew a long trail of knife energy in the void. The knife energy slashed down, heading straight for Bufong. Bufong glanced at the half-step saint. Then, he patted Xiaopi on his shoulder. Immediately, Xiaopi flew out. Whitey's figure was like a lightning giant as it smashed down on Shrimpy's back. He raised a hand and grabbed the knife energy. The saber energy was suddenly crushed. The war god stick, which was bursting with lightning, fell into Xiao Bai's hand. He swung it out and turned into thousands of stick shadows, all of which rushed toward the half-step saint. Boom! 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 The half-step saint roared, raised his knife, and clashed with the stick shadows. On the other side, a whistling sound rang out. A half-step saint shot out of the void. Stepping across the void, he sped toward Bufong. A long spear shot out, piercing a large hole in the void. The half-step saint's eyes widened as he grinned hideously. Die! The spear went straight for Bufong's head. Suddenly, the half-step saint's pupils constricted. That was because he noticed that Bufong had tilted his head slightly and was looking at him. It was as if he was looking at a dead man. It made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This 9-star, true immortal boy actually gave him a pressure that was even more terrifying than the little saint's. The next moment, the half-step saint's pupils shrank to the size of beans. In front of his eyes, a rainbow dumpling in the shape of a half-moon flew out. It exploded in front of him. Chapter 1194. In the turbulence of the void, a pitch-black and ice-cold warship was slowly moving forward. The void seemed to be collapsing under its weight. On the deck of the warship, there were two figures standing. One of them had a head full of white hair and an incomparably handsome face. He was holding a transparent wine cup in his hand, and there was a scarlet wine flowing within it. With a slight swirl, the liquor immediately splashed onto the surface of the cup, causing the aroma of the wine to spread out. It was mellow and fragrant. Abyssal demon wine is indeed one of the 3 specialties of the Abyss. It's delicious, Inge said as he swirled the wine cup. Behind him was the expressionless Luya with a cold look on his face. A creaking sound rang out from the cabin. Several figures slowly walked out of the cabin. There were also a few white-haired men. Their gazes fell on Inya, and a smile appeared on their faces. Of course, abyssal demon wine is good. Even the perfected Chelan chefs of our Nether Chef clan admire it very much, a handsome man said with a smile. The brewing process of abyssal demon wine is very complicated. It's said that young and beautiful purebred abyssal demons are required to pick the best demon fruits, crush them, and then wrap them in cold porcelain jars around the bellies of beautiful abyssal demon girls until they reach adulthood. Then, the wine will be permeated with their body fragrance and pure spiritual energy. Those girls wrapped in the wine are not allowed to have sexual intercourse or even touch male abyssal demons in order to restore the original taste of the wine, the man said with a smile. His tone was full of admiration for the abyssal demon wine. Moreover, when you drink the wine, the abyssal demon girls will pour and serve you, which will sublimate the taste of the wine. Shadowstream chuckled and exclaimed in admiration. Winemaking was an art, and those who could come up with this winemaking technique were geniuses. Although Inya didn't know how to cook, he admired these chefs. I've sent an invitation to the Heaven Chief realm. Do you think they will come? The man came to Inya's side with a cup of blood-red demon wine in his hand. He turned to look at Inya. They will definitely come. Although the Heaven Chief realm is protected by the Heaven Tree, it will always be shrouded in uneasiness without the birth of a divine chef. That's why they can't refuse the divine chef's remains. Inya said as he took a sip of wine. The man smiled. It doesn't matter. So what if they come? The Heaven Chief realm is just a bunch of trash. Their cooking skills are not good enough. If it's a chef's challenge, they will lose everything. The man said indifferently and drank the scarlet wine in one gulp. The Heaven Chief realm is no longer the Heaven Chief realm of the past. Inya glanced at the high-spirited man and smiled faintly. Then I wish you good luck. Dumplings. It was a dumpling. This guy actually threw a dumpling at him. First beef meatballs, now the dumplings. What was this guy thinking? However, after witnessing the terrifying power of the explosive meatball, he did not dare to underestimate this rainbow crescent moon dumpling. Who knew what kind of messy abilities this dumpling would have? Golden flames kept bursting out of Little Hu's mouth. Bufong looked at the half-step saint who was charging at him. His eyes were indifferent. Buzzed the rainbow-colored crescent moon, dumpling exploded. A dazzling 7-colored light filled the sky, illuminating the void. The half-step saint froze. His body tensed up as he prepared to defend against the terrible explosion. However, after a long time, he found that there was no terrible explosion. Is this a joke? The half-step saint was dumbfounded. Then his eyes widened, and he felt relieved. The next moment, with a thought in his mind, he was ready to thrust the spear out and kill Bufong. However, he suddenly discovered that he couldn't move. After being illuminated by the white light, he couldn't even move a finger. The spear also stopped moving in midair. What's going on? What the hell did I encounter this time? The energy in the half-step saint's body rumbled as he tried to move his body. However, no matter how his blood boiled, he could not move his body. This scared the half-saint out of his wits. Damn it, there's actually such a thing? 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, the half-step saint could not move. His heart was filled with fear. The unknown was the most frightening thing. Bufong looked at the half-step saint and slightly twitched the corner of his mouth. Then, he held Little Hu and aimed Little Hu at the half-step saint. Burp? Little Hu burped, and smoke rose from his mouth. It seemed to be stuck. Good boy. Give me another shot. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. Bufong rubbed Little Hu's head. Then, he gently patted Little Hu's butt. Little Hu's eyes widened. He opened his mouth and spat out a dazzling, explosive meatball. The meatball tore through the void and arrived in front of the half-step saint, growing bigger and bigger. Boom! An explosion rang out. The half-step saint's head was blown apart by the explosive meatball. Bufong's eyes shrank, and he let out a soft cry of surprise. He didn't expect that an explosive meatball could kill this half-step saint. After all, a half-step saint's defense was not weak. Could it be that the divine seal dumpling can weaken the defense? Bufong muttered to himself. Little Hu shivered when Bufong patted him on the butt. Then, he climbed up Bufong's body and climbed onto Bufong's head. He stuck out his butt. A fox's face flushed red with embarrassment. In the distance, Yu and Mingqi had joined hands to kill a 9-star true immortal realm expert. They all looked over in confusion, and a strange look appeared on their faces. Was Little Hu going to shit on Bufong's head? This scene seemed a little too beautiful to look at. Bufong's face darkened. He wanted to carry Little Hu down from his head. However, Little Hu's body trembled violently, and his aura suddenly surged. Then, a bright light flickered in his eyes like lightning. A bump suddenly appeared on the side of Little Hu's tail. The bump exploded and a foxtail darted out, swaying in the void. It was like a whip, lashing out and shattering the void. Little Hu had evolved. The two-tailed little fox seemed to be very powerful. Bufong also discovered that Little Hu wasn't shitting, but was just growing a tail. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. If Little Hu were to shit on his head, he would really be sullen. Little Hu, who had grown a second tail, darted into Bufong's arms, seemingly excited. Bufong rubbed Little Hu's head and couldn't help but smirk. This little guy actually broke through after eating so many explosive pissing meatballs. He thought to himself. A few more explosive pissing meatballs flew out. Foxy opened her mouth and ate all of them without any hesitation. In the distance, the little saint sucked in a cold breath. His subordinate, a half-sage, was killed in seconds just like that. How is that possible? Is that kid that strong? Realm Master Dick got excited when he saw that Bufong had killed the half-sage in seconds. He swung the kitchen knife in his hand and became more and more courageous. He was initially suppressed, but now he seemed to be on par with Bufong. The other half-sage who was entangled by Xiao Bai was also extremely shocked. Xiao Bai's fan-like punch landed on his head, and it felt like his head was about to explode. Blood spurted out, and the half-sage moved a distance away in the void. However, Whitey was merciless. The metal wings on its back suddenly flapped. His body moved in an instant. Holding the war god stick in his hand, he thrust it out and hit the half-sage's belly. The half-sage's eyes widened as he coughed up blood. He was forced to fall from the void, hitting the bodies of several 9-star, true immortal realm experts, making them explode. Xiao Bai flapped his wings and hit the experts, making them bleed. The half-sage expert was a little frightened. Was this really a puppet? Apart from the Nether Puppeteer clan of Nether Prison, how could there be such a fearsome puppet in the world? However, unlike the puppets of the Nether Puppeteer clan, this puppet didn't seem to be refined from the corpse of an ancient expert. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed with brilliant light. A moment later, the war god stick fell into his hand. Boom! Lightning shot out, blooming with thousands of rays of light. Countless lightning bolts fell, winding around Xiao Bai's body. Then, Xiao Bai pointed the war god stick at the half-sage expert. The half-sage expert roared. Nether energy soared from his body, turning into a towering blade energy. One stick holds up the sky. Xiao Bai's cold mechanical voice resounded in the void. A moment later, the stick turned into a huge stick that covered the sky. Flames burned on it, and lightning bolts twirled around it. Then it smashed down. With a loud boom, it collided with the half-sage expert's attack. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the half-sage expert's blade energy collapsed. Under the stick, lightning bolts and fire collided. In just a blink of an eye, the half-sage expert turned into ashes. Another half-sage expert had fallen. The other 9-star, true immortal realm experts present all sucked in cold breaths, feeling a chill run down their spines. In the distance, the little saint expert's heart trembled. He couldn't believe it. It was one thing for Bufong to kill a half-sage expert, but how could a puppet kill a half-sage expert? Why were these guys from the Heaven Chief realm different from what he had imagined? Feeling enlightened, Realm Lord Dit laughed. The blade energy fell from the sky, and the turbulent void seemed to be cut into pieces. He had taken control of the battle. forcing the Heaven Chief Little Saint to keep retreating. 2 half-sages had fallen one after another. The remaining true immortal realm experts were shaken. Fear rose in their hearts, and their will to fight weakened. They didn't dare to continue fighting. They had come to capture these people alive, but in the end, there were countless casualties. Whether it was them or the group of spectators in the distance, they all sucked in cold breaths. These experts from the Heaven Chief realm seemed to be stronger than they had expected. Yang Zheng clenched his fists. He could feel the difficulty of the task. It wasn't easy to capture these 4 people alive. The youth with the little hoof fox, the puppet, and Realm Lord Dit. It was very difficult to deal with, and they might suffer heavy casualties. Now, they could only hope that the Shadow Demon Clan could seriously injure these people. Only then would they have a chance to reap the benefits. Sounds of explosions rang out. Countless people began to flee. Their will to fight had been completely shattered. They fled in a frenzy. The little saint shouted as he defended against Realm Lord Dit's attacks. "All of you, stop right there. Anyone who retreats will be killed." But no matter how he shouted, the panicked experts did not stop. They ran away in the void. There were even some who were carelessly swept into the void turbulence and were instantly devoured into nothingness. Not even their bones were left. The little saint roared angrily. He looked at Bu Fong with eyes that were about to pop out of their sockets. The mission this time had failed. He had made a solemn promise, but in the end, he met his Waterloo. It was all because of this youth. Whether it was the terrifying fox or the terrifying puppet, it was all because of this youth. This youth had to die. The little saint's eyes were cold, and his killing intent surged. In the next moment, he roared, and endless pitch-black light converged. With one move, he forced Realm Lord Dit back and charged at Bu Fong. The void was suddenly torn apart. The little saint arrived in the blink of an eye, bringing with him terrifying nether energy and boundless pressure. The world was dark and gloomy. Die! Bu Fong held little who was trembling in his arms. Bu Fong's eyes focused. Looking at the little saint, he took a deep breath. His mind flickered. The divine seal, dumpling, shot out from his hand. Swish! In the pitch-black nether energy, cold chains swept across the void, smashing toward Bu Fong. They wanted to pierce through Bu Fong and completely seal him. Bu Fong stepped on the void, slowly retreating. His eyes focused. Then, the vermilion robe suddenly burst out with a towering flame, turning scarlet. A pair of flaming wings spread out behind him, and flaming feathers fluttered. Divine seal dumpling. Explode. A dazzling white light instantly bloomed. The white light instantly enveloped the little saint. Bu Fong's mind flickered. Little Hu jumped onto his shoulder, holding the vermilion robe tightly. The black turtle constellation Wok appeared in Bu Fong's hand. The black turtle constellation Wok suddenly became bigger, as if it could cover the sky. A moment later, Bai Guang scattered. The Woks smashed toward the little saint. Black Wok suppressing the world. Eat this old booze, Wok. Chapter 1195. Swoosh. The divine seal dumpling was not as scary as the perishing pot. It was terrifying. However, the stronger the enemy was, the weaker the confinement would be. Once the enemy was imprisoned, his defense would be weakened by at least 70%. Suddenly, Bu Fong sighed softly. Unbelievable. He had thought highly of Bu Fong, but he never expected that, no matter how his blood and qi surged, he could not break free from the confinement. That's right. The little saint felt very aggrieved. The energy in his body was surging, and his blood and qi were tumbling. This was really terrifying. After all, the difference between them was their understanding of the will of the Great Path. The void seemed to be trembling. Ripples spread and sped toward Bu Fong as if to kill Bu Fong. With just 4 people, he had defeated an army led by a little saint of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan. This little chef was a monstrous existence. The defensive power circulating on the surface of his body had disappeared. Yang Zheng's eyes suddenly lit up. Perhaps he could hit him when he was down. Bu Fong frowned and glanced at Realm Lord Dit. His voice echoed through the void. It also contained the will of the great path. Bufong's figure floated in midair. Boom! The little saint's tyrannical aura stagnated. The little saint fell. A terrible explosion rang out. The little saint sneered, his voice echoing through the void. His voice shook the sky, and his divine perception erupted. All of a sudden, the little saint felt a sense of terror. His vermilion robe was crimson, and his flaming wings flashed. You want to kill me? You're just a half-baked little saint from the Heaven Chief realm. The little saint felt the confinement on his body disappear, and his blood and chi surged. His expression changed abruptly. He glanced at the huge warship that was moving toward him and twitched his mouth. Damn it, again. The little saint didn't hesitate at all. His body shot out like a cannonball and flew backward. His face was covered in blood, and his expression was hideous. Was it because of that dumpling? The rainbow-colored crescent moon dumpling was crushed and exploded. Then he took out a teapot. However, the consumption was also huge. After eating 3 divine seal dumplings, his mental energy was nearly depleted. The entire army collapsed. Escape. The dumpling contained the will of the heavenly Tao, which was why it was able to seal his body like this. Suddenly, a dozen breaths were enough for Bufong to torture a half-step saint. The little saint's eyes almost split apart from rage. He held onto the half of his head that had caved in while roaring furiously without end, and his entire body emanated a terrifying killing intent. Camouflage? A dragon's roar. A little saint expert stood in front of the warship, his eyes shining brightly. A teapot in one hand, a pot in the other. City Lord Mengqi's face was also pale and bloodless. At this moment, they felt a wave of despair. His face was serious. Although his expression had always been serious, it was especially serious this time. In less than 3 breaths' time, a black walk ruthlessly smashed down, smashing into his face. His pupils constricted. 1 breath. 2 breaths. Get lost. Realm Lord Dit's movements didn't slow down. Half of the Heaven Chief Little Saint's head had caved in, and blood was flowing. The experts watching from a distance sucked in their breaths. It was like an ant bumping into an elephant. Bufong stepped on Xiaopi, which was blooming with a golden light, and sped away. A bird's cry. He flipped his hand. If he fled now, he would only become someone else's possession. At this moment, Bufong suddenly felt a sense of joy. Can you not be so disgusting? Since when did the experts of the Heaven Chief realm become so strong? A cold, merciless voice rang out from the warship, like the voice of the god of death. The experts of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan were not weaker than their team. Gulp, gulp. His throat rolled. Are you courting death? The silver light abruptly turned into a streak of silver light. Like a meteor dragging a tail, it sped towards the huge, majestic warship. The will of the Great Path was extremely mysterious, and the Saint Realm was a process of comprehending it. His subordinate's face turned serious. He was a tank, but the moment the enemy's attack arrived, he became frail. The little saint couldn't move, and his heart was filled with depression. Realm Lord Dit was so excited that he threw his head back and laughed. The chains clattered. Even the little saint who led the team was killed. He looked like he had nothing to live for. The chains could move, and they smashed the black walk with a clanging sound. Realm Lord Dit froze. The little saint's face was covered with blood, and half of his head was caved in by Bufong. His mind flickered. I can't eat dumplings in my life. Not even in my next life. His golden armor burst into dazzling light as he charged toward the little saint in a flash. The black walk brought with it an unparalleled power as it smashed down. On the black walk, mysterious patterns were drawn, and they contained terrifying energy fluctuations. It was less than a meter away from the little saint's face. In his palm, a rainbow-colored crescent moon dumpling floated. The little saint hadn't sensed death for many years, and this feeling made him suffocate. You're courting death. Yang Zheng was indeed a little afraid. The little saint widened his eyes, staring at Bufong with surging, killing intent. The black turtle constellation walk shrank rapidly, and in the end, Bufang grabbed it. In the next instant, it seemed to be very impressive. Bufang's face was pale, and he looked a little weak. One had to know that Bufang could smash a little saint to death with a dried walk. A crescent moon dumpling swayed and exploded in front of the little saint. It completely tore apart the radiance of the rainbow-colored crescent moon dumpling and rushed out. This made Realm Master did almost think that he was killing a 9-star, true immortal realm expert. This defense was too fragile, wasn't it? Suddenly, it came to a place not far from the little saint. Yang Zheng made an analysis in an instant. In the distance, the warship rolled over, rumbling loudly. Even he couldn't guess Bufang's trump card. These 4 people from the Heaven Chief realm were nothing to be afraid of. 3 breaths. It wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. That dish, a miserable howl, resounded in the void. Boom! In the distance, the little saint's eyes suddenly focused, and his mind suddenly froze. His face was extremely solemn. Let me lend you a hand. The little saint's vitality was very strong. Half his head had been smashed, so he didn't die. However, Meng Qi's eyes shone, and she was in high spirits. Facing the approaching shadow demon warship, he wasn't worried that Bufang would be killed by this little saint. Forget it. There's really no other way. Do you still have the strength to resist? Just surrender. Then he raised his hand. He still hadn't calculated the time of 3 breaths. Was it really going to end like this? Damn it! Damn it! The black turtle constellation walk kept expanding until it covered the sky. A mere 9-star, true immortal realm expert dares to fight against the little saint. You don't know how the word death is written, do you? The warship rumbled, crossing the void in an instant, crushing it. Bufang raised the black turtle constellation walk and smashed it down. When the Shadow Demon Squad completely breaks up the 4 people from the Heaven Chief realm, we'll act quickly and capture them alive. No, we just need to capture that young man alive. He's the one the great sage needs. Although his mental force had reached the half-step saint realm, it wasn't strong enough. His subordinate sucked in a cold breath and said in a trembling voice. Bufang sighed. This scene gave the Shadow Demon Clan experts, who had been watching from a distance, a chance. Bufang actually forced back a little saint without using the perishing pot. How'd he do it? Realm Lord Dit said coldly, his voice full of terrible killing intent. The 7-colored light flickered and finally turned into a dazzling white light, dazzling and eye-catching. The little saint's pupils constricted. Boom! A deafening sound spread out like a ripple, collapsing in the void. You're the one who deserves to die. At this moment, Bufang was in high spirits. He had seen this kind of technique before. Realm Lord Dit sucked in a cold breath. Young Master Ingya knew you would come, so he ordered us to ambush you here. You've defeated the Nether Chef team and used all your tricks. What else do you have to deal with us? The Divine Seal Dumpling was carved with the imprisoned gourmet array, which could confine enemies. You fixed her black eyes on Bufang, glowing brightly. A wisp of silver light bloomed in her palm. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of the little saint. This little chef is just a 9-star true immortal. How could he comprehend the will of the great path? This ambush and siege had completely collapsed. Wait, the Shadow Demon Clan has made their move. That young man's face doesn't look right. His mental force must be depleted. How can the technique used to deal with the little saint come without a price? Even at their level, this boy is still using a despicable trick. A 9-star true immortal almost killed a little saint. Everything in front of him had turned pitch black. After using 3 divine seal dumplings in a row, he felt that his mental force could not take it anymore. That relaxed feeling. Looking at the dumplings, the little saint's heart trembled. They knew that the sheep was about to reap the benefits, but if they used young Master Ingya's name, they would definitely scare them away. Did Bufang boy come up with something new? Bufang's face turned slightly pale. The sound of bones breaking rang out. Moreover, he saw that Bufang's face was extremely unsightly. Clearly, he had reached his limit. Tiger roar. Boom! The energy and blood of a little saint was enough to soar into the sky. At that moment, the little saint's body seemed to freeze. What kind of technique is that? His spirit, suddenly surged and turned into raging waves. He drank a mouthful of strong tea. Die. Because he discovered that his body was suddenly unable to move, as if he had been shackled by an invisible force. Realm Lord Dit sneered and crossed his arms over his chest. In the past, he would be worried about Bufong, but now, Yang Zheng took a deep breath. From the dumplings just now, he felt a strange fluctuation, which belonged to the will of the Great Path. In the sky, a deafening sound rang out. The little saint's heart thumped as he thought of the key point. Realm Lord Dit smiled bitterly. He was indeed too naive. In front of 10,000 enemies, drinking tea without fear. 1 against 10,000. Yang Zheng was dumbfounded. His subordinates instinctively looked into the distance. Their hearts felt like they were being grabbed by a big hand. The little saint's energy was extremely powerful. As it spread out, it seemed to turn into a huge ripple. However, against the little saint, the confinement effect was so weak that it could only last for 3 breaths. His mental energy swept out. Bufong's face was indifferent, his face expressionless. Realm Lord Dit narrowed his eyes. Picking up the teapot, he poured the 9-revolution Great Path tea into his mouth. Bufong asked. Everybody sucked in a breath of cold air. The dazzling light stunned the little saint. To be able to imbue the will of the Great Path into ingredients, a cracking sound rang out in the sky. The difference between a 9-star true immortal realm expert and a saint realm expert was like the difference between heaven and earth. The little saint's tough bones and glowing skin were instantly deformed by the walk. With a roar, the little saint's experts broke away from Baiguang, running away. In the distance, the great sage's life force was even stronger. Even if he was completely destroyed, as long as he had a drop of blood, he could be reborn. Bufong said calmly. What kind of technique was that? The little saint was sent flying backward, and his chains were broken. Realm Lord Dit's face changed. His words were not only for Bufong's group to hear, but also for Yang Zheng's group, who were watching from afar and planning to take advantage of the situation. The 7-colored light burst out again, covering the little saint. Chains stretched across the pitch-black sky, making a clanking sound. 7-colored radiance spread out, and a rich fragrance filled the air. It enveloped the little saint's body, causing him to be enveloped in it. Both times, he was restrained when he was about to exert his power. Here, where can we escape to? A dazzling, perishing pot hovered in Bufong's hand. Not being able to smash this little saint to death with a single walk was a sign that he was not skilled enough. So, as the little saint of the Nether Chef clan, although he was not a Chilean chef, he was fortunate enough to see the dishes cooked by divine chefs. A huge black wok was growing bigger and bigger in his eyes. So, he crossed his arms and watched the show. A golden knife light burst out of it and slashed toward the little saint's head. It was extremely terrifying. Realm Lord Dit's eyes lit up. Is this a new gourmet weapon? Only those who have experienced it would understand the despair. Of course, such a great sage was invincible in the great sage realm. My lord, are we still going to attack? He took advantage of this moment to strike. It was as if he was going to cut the little saint in half. He felt a little tired. He was not strong enough to face a team at its peak. That feeling was as if he was really dying. Shameless. Bufong flicked his fingers. Is there such a genius in the world? Swoosh. Therefore, Bufong had to seize every second. The lightning struck down and cut the little saint's body in half. The next moment his eyes widened. The shadow demon little saint said solemnly. The fragrant tea entered his mouth. Perhaps this is how it feels to show off. His face was ruddy. He could restrain a half-step saint for a dozen breaths. Otherwise, once the little saint came to his senses, it would be a little difficult for Bufong to deal with him. The little saint's face was distorted. I haven't led the Heaven Chief realm to glory. I really don't want to give up, The nether chefs who participated in the battle were either dead or running away. Some were swallowed by the void turbulence halfway. They were also shrouded in despair. So, he was not worried about Bufong at all. A turtle roar. Without the young man's endless tricks, let's run. Relmor Dit said helplessly. Xiaopi, who had turned into a golden lightning bolt, arrived in a flash, dragging Bufong. Chapter 1196. A crimson island floated in the boundless starry sky. The island was huge and shaped like an inverted cone. Its sharp corners drooped down like stalactites, making it look like a sharp sword that wanted to tear a corner of the void. The crimson island kept drifting in the void in a regular arc. On the island, there was a huge canyon that seemed to have been carved out with a knife. The canyon was steep, and it was called the Abyss. The Abyss had a long history, but its ending was tragic. After it was invaded by the Nether Prison, its resources were completely plundered, and countless abyssal demons were wiped out. Today, most of the demons in the Abyss were mixed-blood abyssal demons. As for pure-blooded abyssal demons, they were very rare. Above the huge island, one warship after another came from all directions and hovered above it. The abyssal winged dragons flapped their wings clumsily, slowly flew over, and landed on the island. Not far from the abyss, many warships and abyssal winged dragons were anchored on the surface of the island. The warships represented Nether Prison experts, while the abyssal winged dragons might be experts who came to the abyss to search for treasures or merchants who came to the abyss to trade. Inside a tall warship that exuded a chilly aura, the door of the cabin opened. Layers of crimson dust rose from the surface of the island. Then, a group of people slowly walked out of the cabin. Inya and Luya walked out unhurriedly. Inya looked gentle and had a smile on his face. However, Luya looked indifferent. "We've finally arrived at the Abyss," Inya said with a smile. "The Chilan Chef feast is already waiting for us, but can those people from the Heaven Chief realm make it?" A man in a black chef robe walked out of the warship with a faint smile on his face. He was the man who had fought with Inya on the warship. "It doesn't matter if they come or not. I didn't think they could make it to the Abyss when I send out the invitations. After all, there are so many gifts waiting for them," Inya said with a smile. A gust of wind blew over, rolling up the crimson sand and causing Inya's gray-white hair to flutter. The man chuckled and shook his head. "You don't understand. Although you have learned a lot of cooking skills from us, you don't know what the Heaven Chief realm means to us. If I can really defeat the Heaven Chief realm's Heaven Chief in cooking, it'll be very good for my future growth. So, I hope they can come here." "How unreasonable. Since you hoped that they would rush over, why did you send people to intercept them?" The corner of Ya's mouth twitched. His smile became a little chilling. "Thinking is one thing. Doing is another." The man chuckled and strode toward the bottomless abyss. Inya's eyes narrowed as he stared at the ladder. He gently exhaled and followed after them. Although he was not a member of the Nether Chef clan, if he could obtain the Divine Chef's legacy, it would be of great help to him in the future. He was now the leader of the younger generation, but if he obtained the Divine Chef's inheritance in the future, he might become the leader of Nether Prison. This is a different concept. As long as one has ambition, the future will always be different. In this Chilan Chef feast, the only ones who could really threaten him were the few geniuses of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan. As for the people from the Heaven Chief realm, they might have been killed and turned into dregs by now. They were indeed killed and turned into dregs. However, it was not Bufong and the others who were killed, but the shadow demon worship in the distance. Bufong's crimson vermilion robe was fluttering and flapping noisily. The flaming wings on his back flapped, sending flaming feathers flying. With a flick of his finger, a silver stream of light fell like a meteor and sped toward the warship in the distance. The meteor was very small, like a speck of dust compared to the towering warship. However, as the speck of dust sped through the air, it stirred up a mighty wave that made the eyes of the people on the warship narrow. It never occurred to Yang Zheng that Bufong still had a trick up his sleeve. How many trump cards does that young man have? He always pulls out unimaginably terrible trump cards when people think he's at the end of his rope. Earlier, it was the crescent moon dumplings, and now, a huge dried pot. Compared with the crescent moon dumplings, the terrible fluctuation contained in the dried pot was even more frightening. With a ripping sound, the sky seemed to be torn apart. The dried pot kept spinning, and a rich aroma spread from it. A white flame burned under the silver lotus, and wisps of hot air and immortal energy kept rising from the pot. Anyone who smelled it would feel something different. The worship of the Shadow Demon clan crushed the void and brought terrible pressure. It kept approaching Bufong and the others. At the front of the worship stood a little saint of the Shadow Demon clan. The little saint's eyes were focused, and he dared not to be careless. Just now, he saw with his own eyes that a little saint was killed by that young man. That was the little saint of the 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan. Among the 9 clans in Nether Prison, the 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan ranked higher than the Shadow Demon clan, so the little saint was definitely not weaker than him. However, a little saint with that kind of cultivation base was killed. That was the most frightening thing. Therefore, the little saint of the Shadow Demon clan dared not to be careless. Attack the warship. Kill them. Looking at the silver dried pot speeding toward them, the little saint tensed up and let out a loud cry. His voice rang out in the void. It made the void tremble. As soon as his voice rang out on the battleship, many deep holes suddenly appeared. Frightening energy was gathering at the entrance of the cave. Rays of white light converged on the warship and shot out. Their speed was so fast that they seemed to have turned into beams of light in the boundless void, crashing toward the perishing pot with the intention of wiping it out completely. However, they might not know the power of the perishing pot. They didn't know the principle behind it either. Bufong's eyes narrowed when he saw the surging energy bursting out of the perishing pot. Then he asked you to start the Netherworld ship, and a group of people landed on it. Then he told you to fly away in an instant. The perishing pot was extremely violent, and now it had absorbed so much energy to detonate it. The destructive fluctuation it produced. It was enough to destroy everything. By now, the power of the perishing pot was no longer within Bufong's control. It was mainly due to the influx of energy from the battleships that the energy in the dried pot had reached a critical point of destruction. Boom! A deafening rumble rang out. An explosion rang out. In the void, the spinning perishing pot suddenly burst into a dazzling light. The white light rose like a scorching sun, shining brilliantly and illuminating the whole void as if it were daytime. Everyone on the Shadow Demon warship was stunned. The little saint stared blankly at the bright white light at the front of the warship. He had never seen such brilliance before. Rumble. The light was dazzling. After a long time, he heard a deafening rumble. It made his eardrums feel as if they were about to burst, and his mind trembled. The little saint was in a trance. The next moment, he widened his eyes and saw the appearance of the perishing pot in the distance. The perishing pot was spinning. It kept enlarging. A brilliant white lotus blotted out the sky and began to expand crazily. Under the white lotus was boiling energy. It devoured some of the void turbulence and destroyed everything that got close to it. What a terrible force it was. The Shadow Demon clan experts on the warship stared blankly. The next moment, they felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over their heads, chilling them to the bone. They shuddered and were filled with fear. Run! The perishing pot devoured everything and pressed toward the warship. They could only run. If they didn't, they would be completely devoured like the warship. The lotus seemed to be born of destruction, and it made people despair. One figure after another flew out of the warship, just like the defeated team of the 9 Revolution Nether Chefs clan. There was a big battle before, but this time, it was even more direct. A perishing pot scared off a team. Boom! A loud rumble rang out. The perishing pot collided with the warship and devoured it in an instant. A loud explosion rang out. The perishing pot boiled to the extreme and finally erupted with endless energy. Flames spread in the void and soared into the sky. Accompanied by a deafening explosion that sounded like the end of the world, the void seemed to be cracked by the impact. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The terrifying shockwave rippled out in all directions like a ripple. Rumbling sounds filled the air. The shadow demon experts who were too slow to escape were swept up by the aftershocks. Their bodies exploded, turning into balls of fire and howling in agony. The little saint walked frantically in the void, trying to avoid the aftershocks of the perishing pot. However, he was horrified to find that he couldn't escape. The ripples came and swept over his body. The little saint turned around and roared. He raised his palm and met the destructive ripples head-on. With a boom, his whole body seemed to explode, and blood spattered everywhere. His eyes were filled with horror, and blood oozed out of his pores. In just a flash, he had turned into a bloody man. The explosion was too terrible. The Netherworld ship sped away. Standing on the deck, Realm Lord Dit sucked in a cold breath. What kind of power was that? Bufong's perishing pot seemed to be stronger than before. They're courting death. They used the warship's violent energy beams to hit the perishing pot, causing it to explode twice as much. It's at least twice as much energy as before. It's enough to blast the little saint into nothingness. Standing on the warship, Bufong said, his face pale. After saying that, he poured a mouthful of tea into his mouth. The amount of mental energy needed to activate the violent energy in the dry pot was simply too great. The greater the power, the greater the price. If it weren't for the 9 Revolution Great Path tea, Bufong's Spirit Sea would have collapsed long ago. Rumble. Ripples spread out, battering against the Netherworld ship, causing it to sway unceasingly. However, under Yu's control, the Netherworld ship steadily sailed into the distance. Yang Zheng's eyes were dull. It wasn't just Yang Zheng. His subordinates were also scared out of their wits. One move, just one move. The elite squad of the Shadow Demon clan, which was led by a little saint, was completely destroyed. It was almost like the whole squad was wiped out. The warship collapsed, and the little saint fled, covered in blood. The few people from the immortal cooking realm had escaped another calamity. Looking at the surging mushroom cloud and the earth-shattering power, he felt a chill run down his spine. Yang Zheng knew that even he would be killed in an instant if he had to face that mushroom cloud. That kind of attack could only be resisted by an existence at the level of a 3-revolution little saint. Wait, where are the people from the Heaven Chief realm? All of a sudden, Yang Zheng recovered from his shock. His eyes narrowed as he roared. His subordinates were also puzzled and surprised. The people from the Heaven Chief realm had disappeared. Search for them. They will never use such a powerful attack a second time. This time, they are really at their wits' end. Yang Zheng roared. His subordinate glanced at Yang Zheng, saying with some worry, "Your Excellency, you said the same thing before." Yang Zheng froze, glaring at his subordinate. His subordinates didn't dare to say anything else. Roar, roar, roar. Dragon roars resounded. They immediately mounted their tiger-winged dragons and sped away, chasing into the distance. In the distance, they saw a pitch-black Netherworld ship. Found it. Yang Zheng's eyes flashed. On the Netherworld ship, Yu furrowed her brows, walking to the stern and looking into the distance. Dense dragon roars and tiger roars resounded from there. Nether prison soldiers were chasing after them. Realm Lord Dit's face was extremely unsightly. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves. Nether prison had gone too far. Enough is enough. 3 waves of attacks. They were trying to kill him. Wasn't it just a Qilin chef feast? Bufong drank the 9 Revolution Great Path tea to restore his mental force. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the approaching Nether prison experts on the backs of the tiger-winged dragons. On the back of the leading tiger-winged dragon, Yang Zheng's eyes shone brightly. With a long roar, a ferocious goat's head emerged behind him. Terrible energy fluctuations were about to spill toward the Netherworld ship. Bufong exhaled softly. It seems there's no other way. I can only use that trick. Bufong said. You and the others froze. Did Bufong still have a trump card? Under everyone's curious gazes, Bufong took out a silver perishing pot. He stood expressionlessly on the deck, facing Yang Zheng, and waved the perishing pot in his hand. A faint voice rang out in the void. Guess if I can make this perishing pot explode again. The bluffing step was online. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.